What if the moment you feel most unprotected is the very moment God is drawing you beneath His shelter? What if His protection does not always begin with the storm disappearing, the medical report changing, the money arriving, or the difficult situation suddenly resolving itself? What if it begins when, in the middle of the darkness, you realize that you were never standing alone? Most people have heard the words of Psalm 91. They have seen them printed inside old family Bibles, written on small cards beside hospital beds, spoken before long journeys, whispered over sleeping children, and repeated in homes where fear arrived without warning. It is one of the most comforting passages in all of Scripture, yet there is something hidden near its beginning that many people overlook. Before the psalm speaks about angels, rescue, protection, deliverance, or victory, it speaks about a place, a secret place beneath the shadow of the Almighty. And the entire meaning of the psalm begins there. Imagine a house late at night. The rooms are still, and the clock in the hallway moves forward 1 second at a time. Outside, tree branches bend gently in the wind while rain taps against a dark window. Somewhere in the distance, a car passes along an empty road, its headlights briefly moving across the bedroom ceiling before disappearing. Everyone else in the house seems to be asleep, but one person remains awake. Their body is tired, yet their mind refuses to rest. They turn toward one side of the bed, and then the other. They close their eyes, but the darkness only gives their thoughts more room to speak. A medical appointment is approaching. A child has become distant. A job feels uncertain. Bills are waiting on the kitchen table. A relationship is changing. Someone they love is traveling. A decision must be made, but every possible choice feels unclear. Nothing terrible is happening inside the room. There is no visible enemy standing outside the door. Yet fear has entered quietly, and fear does not always need to break a window or raise its voice. Sometimes it enters through a single thought. What if something goes wrong? The question appears small at first, but it rarely stays small. What if the test results are bad? What if the money runs out? What if the person I love leaves? What if I have already made the wrong decision? What if the opportunity never comes? What if my prayer is not answered? What if God remains silent? The person opens their eyes again. The room has not changed, but it no longer feels peaceful. Shadows appear darker. Ordinary sounds seem unfamiliar. The future feels close enough to threaten them, yet distant enough that they cannot control it. They reach toward the table beside the bed, where there is a phone, a glass of water, and an old Bible. For a moment, they consider reaching for the phone. Perhaps another message will distract them. Perhaps watching another video will make them tired. Perhaps searching for more information will help them feel prepared. But somewhere deep inside, they already know that more information will not quiet this particular fear. The problem is not only that they do not know what will happen. The deeper problem is that they feel completely alone in not knowing. So their hand moves toward the Bible. It opens almost naturally to a page that has been read many times. The paper is thin and slightly worn. Several lines have been underlined, and beside one verse someone once wrote a small date in faded ink. Perhaps that date marked another difficult night. Perhaps another person once sat in another room, carrying another fear, and found comfort on the same page. The first words of Psalm 91 begin with an image. The one who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest beneath the shadow of the Almighty. The person reads the words slowly, not because the sentence is difficult to understand, but because the heart sometimes needs time to believe what the eyes have already seen. The one who dwells, not the one who visits occasionally, not the one who never feels afraid, not the one who understands every mystery, not the one whose faith is always strong and whose prayers are always confident, the one who dwells. There is something deeply personal in that word "ker." To dwell means to remain, to stay, to make a home, and to return again and again until a place becomes familiar. A traveler may visit a house for one evening, but the person who dwells there knows where the floor creaks. They know how the morning light enters the room. They know which window faces the sunrise and where to go when the storm begins. Psalm 91 is not offering a secret sentence that forces every danger to disappear. It is inviting the heart into a relationship so close that God becomes home, and that invitation changes everything. Many people think about God's protection only when something frightening happens, when the doctor calls, when the child does not return home on time, when the plane begins to shake, when the company announces layoffs, when a storm approaches, when a loved one becomes sick, or when the future suddenly loses its familiar shape. In those moments, prayer often becomes urgent. God, please help me, God. Please protect them, God. Do not let this happen, God. Where are you? There is nothing wrong with those prayers. God is not offended by desperation. He does not turn away from people simply because they waited until the night became dark before calling his name. Throughout Scripture, frightened people cry out. Confused people ask questions, grieving people speak from wounded hearts, and exhausted people approach God with prayers that are incomplete. He listens to them. But Psalm 91 points towards something deeper than emergency prayer. It describes a life that has learned to remain close to God before danger arrives, while danger is present, and after danger has passed. It is the difference between knowing where a shelter is located and learning to live inside it. The person in the quiet bedroom reads the opening line once more. The one who dwells in the secret place of the Most High. A secret place. The phrase sounds mysterious. It may bring to mind a hidden room, a mountain cave, or a silent sanctuary protected from the noise of the world. But where is this place? Can it be found on a map? Does it exist only for people with extraordinary faith? Is it reached through perfect prayers? Is it available only to pastors, missionaries, monks, saints, or those who understand the Bible better than everyone else? Or could the secret place be much closer than that? Could it be entered in an ordinary bedroom at 2 in the morning? Could it be found while someone sits alone inside a parked car, gathering the courage to walk into a difficult meeting? Could it appear beside a hospital window while a family waits for news? Could it exist at a kitchen table where someone lowers their head because they no longer know what else to do? Could it begin with one whispered sentence? God, I am afraid, but I am here. The secret place is not hidden because God wants to keep people away. It is hidden because the world does not always recognize it. The world notices visible strength. It admires certainty. It praises control. It tells people to prepare for every possibility, protect themselves from every disappointment, and never allow anyone to see them looking weak. But the secret place begins where human control ends. It begins when a person stops pretending that they can carry every possible outcome alone. It begins when the heart turns toward God and says, I cannot see what is coming, but you can. I cannot hold everyone I love, but you can. I cannot control tomorrow, but tomorrow is already known to you. I do not feel strong, but I am willing to stay near you. That is not weakness. It is one of the deepest forms of faith. Yet even this kind of faith can feel very small. The person reading beside the bed does not suddenly feel fearless. The wind still touches the window. The medical appointment is still coming. The bills have not disappeared. The uncertain conversation still needs to happen. Nothing outside the room has changed, and this is where many people misunderstand the presence of God. They expect that if God is near, fear should immediately vanish. They believe that if their faith is genuine, their breathing should instantly slow, their questions should stop, and their thoughts should become peaceful at once. When that does not happen, they begin to wonder whether they have failed. Perhaps they are not trusting enough. Perhaps they are not praying correctly. Perhaps God is disappointed with them. But Scripture rarely presents faith as the absence of all difficult emotion. Faith is often a direction before it becomes a feeling. It is the frightened heart turning toward God even while it is still trembling. It is the exhausted mind choosing one true promise while 100 fearful possibilities continue speaking. It is the decision to remain, the decision to dwell. The ancient world in which the psalm was first heard understood the importance of shelter. Travel could be dangerous, and the wilderness was not empty in the peaceful way modern people sometimes imagine it. It could be unforgiving. The sun could burn without mercy during the day, while temperatures could fall sharply after night arrived. Wild animals, thieves, sickness, hunger, and sudden storms were not distant possibilities. They were realities people understood. A traveler without shelter was exposed. A city without strong walls was vulnerable. A family without a safe dwelling could not truly rest. So when the psalm speaks about the shelter of the Most High, it uses an image people could feel. A shelter was not merely a decoration or a pleasant place to visit, it was survival. It was the place where danger could no longer approach from every direction. It was where the exhausted removed their sandals, lowered their burdens, and finally allowed their bodies to rest. Then the psalm adds another image, the shadow of the Almighty. In a hot and dry land, shade was more than comfort. It could preserve life. A shadow meant that something greater stood between the traveler and the burning sun. The traveler might still feel the heat. They might still see the brightness beyond the shelter. They might still understand the danger outside, but they were no longer facing it without covering. That is the first great promise of Psalm 91. Something greater stands between you and everything that seeks to destroy your hope. Not because you are strong enough, not because you have prepared for every danger, and not because you have never doubted, but because the Almighty is near. Notice the name used here, the Almighty. The psalm does not say the shadow of someone slightly stronger than your fear. It does not describe one who understands most things but may still be surprised by tomorrow. It speaks of the one whose strength does not weaken, whose wisdom does not become confused, who does not sleep through the night, who is never informed too late, and who has never looked at a human life and said, "I did not expect this." Your fear may surprise you. The news may surprise you. Another person's decision may surprise you. Your own emotions may surprise you. But nothing has ever surprised God. This does not mean that He causes every painful event. It does not mean that every loss is easy to understand. It does not mean every frightening possibility will become reality, or that every painful reality will immediately be removed. It means that uncertainty is only uncertainty from the human side. God does not stand inside tomorrow waiting to discover what will happen. He is already there, and the shadow of His presence reaches into places you have not yet entered. The person beside the bed pauses. Their eyes move from the page toward the dark window. For the first time that night, they consider a different possibility. Perhaps they do not need to solve tomorrow tonight. Perhaps they do not need to imagine every danger in order to protect themselves. Perhaps their mind has been rehearsing pain, as though worry could prevent it. But worry has never been able to walk into tomorrow and prepare the road. It only steals strength from today. The person looks back at the page and continues reading. The psalm becomes personal. The writer does not only speak about God, he speaks to God. He calls Him His refuge and His fortress, my God, in whom I trust. There is an important movement here. The psalm begins with a general truth about the person who dwells with God, but then it becomes a personal confession. My refuge, my fortress, my God. Faith often begins this way. A promise that once belonged to someone else slowly becomes your own. You hear that God has helped other people. You read stories of those who trusted Him. You remember the faith of a parent, a grandparent, a friend, or someone who carried peace through an impossible season. You listen as someone describes how God sustained them through something they never believed they could survive. At first, the truth feels borrowed. Their God, their refuge, their testimony. But eventually, a moment comes when borrowed faith is no longer enough. You must speak for yourself. My God. Not because you understand Him completely. Not because you have never been disappointed. Not because every prayer has been answered in the way you hoped, but because somewhere along the road you have seen enough of His faithfulness to place your weight upon Him again. A refuge is where someone runs, while a fortress is where someone stands. The two images belong together. There are moments when faith looks like running toward God with tears, confusion, and urgent prayer. There are other moments when faith looks like standing quietly inside what He has already said. Sometimes you need refuge because you are exhausted. Sometimes you need a fortress because fear is attacking your thoughts. And sometimes the attack is not an event, it is a sentence. You are alone. Nothing will change. You will not survive this. God has forgotten you. Your past has disqualified you. Your future is already ruined. Fear repeats these sentences until they begin to feel like truth. But a fortress is built from something stronger than emotion. It is built from the character of God. Feelings change quickly, but God does not. Circumstances can turn through a single phone call, but God does not. Human promises sometimes fail because people become tired, distracted, frightened, or unable to keep them. God does not make promises from a place of limited strength. When God says He is near, His nearness does not depend on whether you can feel it at every moment. When He says He hears, His hearing does not depend on the beauty of your prayer. When He says you belong to Him, your belonging is not cancelled by one difficult night. This is why trust is not the same as certainty about a particular outcome. The person in the room may still not know what the doctor will say. They may not know whether the job will remain, whether the relationship will heal, whether the money will come, or when the answer will finally appear. But they can know the one who will be present when it does. That kind of trust is quieter than confidence in a specific result, but it is also deeper. It says, I do not know what will happen, but I know where I will go. I do not know what tomorrow will bring, but I know where I will dwell. I do not know whether the road will become easier, but I know I will not walk it without God. Perhaps that is the beginning of true safety, not having control over every circumstance, but knowing where to place your heart when control is gone. The rain outside becomes heavier, and for several moments it fills the silence. The person closes the Bible but keeps one hand resting on its cover. They are not finished reading, they are simply remembering. Years earlier, they faced another night that felt impossible. At the time, life seemed to have narrowed into a dark corridor with no visible door. They prayed for an immediate answer, but the answer did not come immediately. They prayed for the situation to disappear, but it did not disappear. Yet something else happened. A friend called at the exact moment loneliness became unbearable. A meal appeared when there was little strength to cook. A verse returned to mind during a moment of panic. A door closed that later proved dangerous. A delay that once felt cruel eventually became protection. A strength appeared that had not been present the day before. None of these moments looked like a dramatic miracle. There was no thunder from heaven and no visible angel standing in the room. The problem was not solved all at once. But looking back, the person can see a pattern. They were carried quietly, patiently, and one day at a time. Could that also be protection? People often imagine God's protection only as prevention, the accident that did not happen, the illness that never came, the danger that passed by, or the plan that failed before it could cause harm. Sometimes protection does look exactly like that. There are moments when people look back and realize they were spared from something they never even saw. But there is another kind of protection, the protection that preserves the soul while life remains difficult. The protection that keeps bitterness from taking control. The protection that gives peace before an answer. The protection that sends help through ordinary hands. The protection that prevents pain from becoming the final definition of a life, and the protection that holds someone together when they feel as though they are falling apart. The person in the room begins to understand that Psalm 91 may be offering something far greater than a promise of comfortable circumstances. It may be describing a life so deeply hidden in God that no external threat can completely possess the heart. But a difficult question remains. If God is truly a refuge, why do faithful people still suffer? Why do prayers sometimes seem unanswered? Why do people who trust God still receive painful news? Why do storms enter homes where Psalm 91 has been read for years? These questions cannot be ignored, because a shallow answer will not survive a real night of fear. A person sitting beside a hospital bed does not need empty promises. A parent worried about a child does not need religious words that pretend pain is simple. Someone grieving a deep loss does not need to be told that stronger faith would have prevented every sorrow. Psalm 91 is not fragile. It does not need to be protected from difficult questions. In fact, the psalm itself will soon speak about traps, disease, terror, arrows, darkness, destruction, danger, and trouble. It does not describe an imaginary world where nothing frightening exists. It describes where God can be found inside the real one. For now, the opening invitation remains: dwell, stay. Do not run from God because you are afraid. Run toward Him. Do not wait until your thoughts become peaceful before you pray. Bring Him the thoughts exactly as they are. Do not believe that your trembling disqualifies you from His shelter. The shelter exists because human beings tremble. A refuge is not built for people who never need one. The person beside the bed opens the Bible again. This time, they do not rush. They read the first words as though they are standing at the entrance of a house. The one who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. Then they whisper a simple prayer. God, teach me to dwell. It is not an impressive prayer. It does not contain complicated theological language. It does not explain the entire situation, and it does not even ask for a particular outcome. It is only an honest request. Teach me to stay near you. Teach me not to disappear into fear. Teach me to recognize your presence before I see the solution. Teach me to rest beneath what I cannot fully understand. For a moment, nothing visible happens. The rain continues. The clock continues. The future remains unknown. But the person takes a slower breath, and then another. The fear is still present, but it is no longer the only presence in the room. That difference may seem small, yet it is the beginning of everything. Fear had said, "You are alone with this," but the psalm says, "You are beneath His shadow." Fear had said, "You must solve tomorrow now," but the psalm says, "You may rest." Fear had said, "No one sees the danger approaching," but the psalm says, "The Most High is already there." Perhaps God's protection does not always announce itself through a dramatic change in circumstances. Sometimes it arrives as the strength to stop rehearsing disaster. Sometimes it comes as the courage to sleep before the answer appears. Sometimes it is found in the realization that the burden was never meant to be carried by one human heart. The person places the Bible back on the table and turns off the lamp. The room becomes dark again. But it is not the same darkness. Before, the darkness felt empty. Now it feels covered. The problems have not vanished, yet the person no longer feels completely exposed beneath them. They imagine the image from the psalm, a great shelter, a wide shadow, and a presence stronger than the night. Slowly, their body begins to rest. Somewhere between fear and sleep, a truth settles quietly into the heart. Safety may not mean knowing that nothing difficult will ever happen. Safety may mean knowing that whatever happens, God will still be there. But Psalm 91 has only begun. The shelter of God is more than a distant roof above the frightened. And the next image is even more personal. It is the image of wings, not the protection of cold stone walls, not merely the strength of a fortress, but the nearness of one who draws the vulnerable close. Beneath those wings, we begin to discover that God does not only protect his people with power, he protects them with tenderness. There are places in this world where people go because they believe they will be safe. A locked house, a guarded building, a strong city, a room hidden behind thick walls. Yet Psalm 91 speaks of a shelter that cannot be seen from the road and cannot be measured by its doors. It is a place no enemy can locate, no storm can destroy, and no human hand can build. The secret place of the Most High is not made of stone, wood, or iron. It exists wherever a human heart turns fully toward God and chooses to remain with him. This is why two people can stand inside the same crisis and experience it very differently. Both may hear the same bad news. Both may face the same uncertainty. Both may carry questions with no immediate answer, yet one feels completely exposed, while the other discovers a quiet strength that does not seem to come from within. The difference is not that one person is more intelligent, more prepared, or less vulnerable. The difference may be that one has learned where to hide, not from reality, but inside the presence of God. Imagine an ancient traveler crossing a wilderness beneath the heat of the afternoon sun. The road is little more than a narrow path pressed into dry earth by generations of footsteps. Dust gathers around his sandals. A small water container hangs from his shoulder, growing lighter with every mile. Behind him, the land he left has already disappeared beyond the hills. Ahead, the destination is still too far away to see. There are no signs telling him how much farther he must travel. No roof waits beside the road. No familiar voice calls from a nearby house. The sky above him is enormous, and the landscape seems to continue without end. At first, the journey may have felt hopeful. He left early in the morning when the air was cool and the horizon was golden. But as the sun rises higher, every step becomes heavier. The heat presses down on his head. His breathing becomes shallow. He begins to search the distance for any sign of shade. A large rock, a grove of trees, a tent. Anything that might stand between him and the burning light. The traveler is not searching for luxury. He is searching for survival. He does not need a beautiful house or a soft bed. He needs one place where he can stop being exposed. At last, far ahead, he notices a dark shape near the base of a hill. At first, he cannot tell whether it is real or merely a trick of the heat. He continues walking, and the shape becomes clearer. A rough shelter has been built beside the road. Its roof is simple, its walls incomplete, and it offers no promise that the journey is over. But beneath it lies a wide patch of shadow. The traveler reaches it and lowers his burden to the ground. He sits beneath the covering and closes his eyes. The sun remains as strong as before. The wilderness has not disappeared. The road ahead is still long, yet his body can finally rest because something greater now stands between him and the heat. This is the image behind the opening of Psalm 91. God's shelter does not always remove the wilderness, but it gives the traveler a place to survive it. It does not always shorten the road, but it allows the weary to continue. It does not always explain why the journey became difficult, but it reminds the heart that difficulty does not mean abandonment. Many people believe they will feel safe only when their circumstances become safe, but they tell themselves they will finally rest when the test results are good, when the debt is paid, when the child returns, when the conflict is resolved, when the job is secure, when the grief becomes lighter, or when the future looks predictable again. Until then, they live as though peace must wait outside the door. But the secret place of God offers another kind of rest. It says that peace can begin before the problem ends. It can appear while the road is still uncertain. Because its source is not the road. Its source is the one who walks beside you. But how does someone enter this secret place? There is no visible doorway. No special location must be reached. No perfect state of mind is required. The entrance is often far more ordinary than people expect. It may begin when someone closes the bedroom door, sits on the edge of the bed, and finally tells God the truth. It may begin when a mother stands at the kitchen sink with tears in her eyes and whispers the name of her child in prayer. It may begin when a man sits in his car before work, places both hands on the steering wheel, and asks God for enough strength to walk through the next hour. It may begin when someone who has not prayed in months lowers their head and says, "I do not know whether I am doing this correctly, but I need you." The secret place is entered through honesty, not impressive words, not spiritual performance, not the ability to hide weakness. It opens when the heart stops running in every direction and turns toward God. The world often teaches people to escape fear by distracting themselves from it. Keep moving, keep scrolling, keep working, keep talking. Fill every quiet space before difficult thoughts can rise. There is always another message to answer, another task to finish, another sound to play in the background. Silence can feel dangerous because silence allows the heart to speak. It reveals exhaustion that busyness has hidden. It uncovers grief that entertainment has delayed. It brings unanswered questions to the surface. Yet the secret place of God is often found on the other side of that silence. Not because silence itself is holy, but because it creates room to notice the presence that noise has been covering. When every other voice becomes quieter, the soul begins to hear what it has forgotten. You do not have to carry this alone. For some people, this idea is difficult because silence does not feel peaceful. Silence feels empty. Perhaps they once prayed for something important and the answer did not come. Perhaps they begged God to change a situation, but the situation became more painful. Perhaps they opened the Bible and found no immediate comfort. They may have heard others speak about feeling God's presence, while their own prayers seemed to rise into an unresponsive sky. Over time, they began to avoid the secret place because it reminded them of disappointment. They still believe in God, but they approach Him carefully. They no longer expect too much. They pray with guarded words, as though hope itself might become another source of pain. To such a person, Psalm 91 does not speak with accusation. It does not say, "You should have trusted better." It offers an invitation. Come closer, even with the questions. The secret place is not reserved for people who have never felt disappointed with God. It is also for those who are trying to find their way back to Him. God is not threatened by the honest heart. Scripture is filled with people who asked why, who wept, who waited, and who wondered how long their suffering would continue. Their prayers were not always calm. Their faith did not always sound confident, yet they continued to turn toward God, and that turning mattered. Dwelling does not mean always feeling certain. It means refusing to make distance from God your permanent home. It means that when you are confused, you bring the confusion to Him. When you are angry, You speak honestly rather than pretending. When you feel numb, you remain without emotion. When you cannot form a beautiful prayer, you offer the few words you still have. Stay with me, help me, I am tired, do not let me go. These may seem like small prayers, but small prayers can open deep rooms in the soul. The person from the night before wakes just before dawn. The rain has stopped, and the window is covered with tiny drops of water. Pale light rests along the edges of the curtains. For a few seconds, the worries from the night are absent. Then, memory returns. The appointment is still coming. The unanswered questions are still waiting. The future has not rearranged itself during sleep. Yet something inside the room feels softer. The Bible remains on the bedside table, open near Psalm 91. The person sits up and reads the first line again. This time, one word seems to rise above the others. Dwell. They begin to understand that the secret place cannot become familiar through one desperate visit. A home is known through repeated return, morning after morning, evening after evening, in calm seasons and difficult ones, in moments of strong faith and moments when faith feels barely present. This is one of the quiet disciplines of trust here. People often wait until they feel spiritual before approaching God, but dwelling is built through ordinary faithfulness. It may be 5 quiet minutes before the house wakes. It may be a short prayer during a lunch break. It may be the decision to read one psalm slowly instead of many chapters quickly. It may be turning off the noise long enough to remember who God is. These moments can seem too small to matter. They may not create an immediate emotional experience, but over time, they shape the inner life. A person who returns to God repeatedly begins to recognize His voice more easily. They remember His character when fear speaks. They notice His provision in ordinary events. They become less dependent on dramatic signs because they have learned to find Him in quiet faithfulness. A visitor needs directions each time they arrive. A dweller knows the way home. This may be why Psalm 91 begins with remaining rather than requesting. The psalm does not first describe someone shouting instructions toward heaven. It describes someone living close to God. Prayer is no longer only a message sent during danger. It becomes the atmosphere of the relationship. Trust is no longer limited to emergencies. It becomes a daily posture. God is not treated as a distant rescuer who must be convinced to come near. He is recognized as the one who has already invited the heart to live beneath His shadow. Yet there is another reason the secret place matters. Fear is often strongest when it convinces a person that they are visible to every danger but invisible to God. The worried mind begins to imagine threats approaching from all directions. Illness may find me, failure may find me, loss may find me, rejection may find me, the mistakes of my past may finally catch me, the future may bring something I cannot survive. Fear creates the sensation of standing alone in an open field, while every possible danger knows exactly where you are. But Psalm 91 reverses the image. It says that there is a place in God where the soul is hidden. This does not mean earthly trouble cannot touch a person. It means trouble cannot fully define, possess, or separate the person from the care of God. The deepest part of their life is held somewhere fear cannot reach. Consider a child standing inside a crowded marketplace. Voices fill the air. People move quickly in every direction. The child loses sight of the parent for only a moment, but panic rises immediately. The familiar world becomes frightening because the child no longer knows where safety is. Then a hand reaches through the crowd and takes hold of theirs. The marketplace does not become quieter, the crowd does not disappear. But the child's entire experience changes because connection has been restored. The secret place is like that hand. It does not always empty the marketplace. It reminds the heart that it has not been abandoned within it. Some believers have quietly assumed that God's protection depends on their ability to hold tightly enough to Him. They imagine themselves hanging above a great distance, gripping faith with tired hands. If they doubt, struggle, or become emotionally exhausted, they fear they may lose their hold and fall. But Scripture repeatedly presents God not only as the one people seek, but as the one who holds them. The secret place is not secured by the strength of the person inside it. It is secured by the character of the one who provides it. A child may fall asleep while being carried because the safety of the journey does not depend on the child remaining awake. In the same way, there are seasons when a person's faith feels active and strong, and there are seasons when their only faith is the willingness to be carried. This is especially important during grief. Grief can make even familiar truths feel distant. A person may know that God is good, yet struggle to feel goodness in the empty chair across the room. They may believe in eternal hope while still feeling the sharp absence of someone they love. They may read promises that once brought comfort and discover that the words now seem blurred by tears. The secret place does not demand that grief hurry. It does not require a broken heart to become cheerful before entering God. God's shelter has room for sorrow. It has room for memories, silence, anger, and questions. Protection does not always mean keeping the heart from breaking. Sometimes it means keeping a broken heart from becoming completely lost. Imagine an elderly woman sitting alone in a small house after sunset. A lamp glows beside her chair. On the table rests a photograph of the person who shared most of her life. The house once held two voices. Now every room carries a different kind of silence. Friends tell her she is strong, but strength is not what she feels when night comes. She opens her Bible because it is what she has done for many years. Some evenings she reads several pages. Other evenings she reads only one line. He who dwells... She does not feel protected from loneliness. Loneliness is already inside the house. Yet as she repeats the words, she remembers that loneliness is not the only presence in the room. She speaks to God about the person she misses. She thanks Him for the years they were given. She cries without apologizing. The secret place does not erase the empty chair, but it prevents the silence from becoming empty of God. This is the kind of protection that cannot always be photographed or explained. It happens in hidden places. A person chooses forgiveness before bitterness hardens. Someone finds strength to rise from bed on a morning when sorrow feels unbearable. A frightened patient experiences peace while waiting for results. A parent releases a child into God's care because control is no longer possible. A person who feels forgotten receives a message from a friend at exactly the right moment. None of these things may look spectacular from the outside, yet heaven often works through quiet preservation. The soul remains alive. Hope continues breathing. Love is not destroyed. Faith bends but does not completely break. The secret place also changes the way people understand prayer. Many approach prayer primarily as a way to change events. They ask God to open doors, close dangers, provide answers, heal sickness, repair relationships, and guide decisions. These are worthy prayers, but prayer is more than asking God to change what is happening around us. It is also allowing His presence to change what is happening within us. Sometimes the circumstances move quickly, sometimes they do not. Yet in prayer, the heart is slowly reordered. Fear is placed beside truth. Anger is brought into the light. Desire is surrendered. The need for control loosens. A person begins to remember that God is not merely one part of the solution. He is the center of their life, even before the solution is seen. There is a quiet danger in only seeking God for what He can provide. The heart may begin to treat Him like a doorway to the life it wants rather than the life it needs. When the desired answer comes, prayer becomes less urgent. When the answer is delayed, faith becomes resentful. But dwelling moves beyond transaction. It says, God, I want your help, but I also want you. I want the answer, but I do not want to miss your presence while waiting for it. I want the door to open, but I want my heart to remain close to you whether it opens today or later. This kind of trust is not easy. It does not develop through one emotional moment. It grows through many returns. Perhaps this is why some of the most peaceful believers are not those who have experienced the easiest lives. They are people who have repeatedly discovered God in places they did not want to enter. They found Him in hospital rooms, funeral gatherings, uncertain journeys, long waits, and seasons when their plans fell apart. They did not learn peace because nothing painful happened. They learned peace because pain could not remove God from the room. Their faith became less dependent on understanding and more rooted in presence. When they say, God is faithful, they are not repeating a phrase they have never tested. They are speaking from roads where faithfulness was sometimes the only light they had. The traveler in the wilderness eventually rises from the shelter. He drinks the remaining water, lifts the burden to his shoulder, and looks toward the path ahead. The shelter has not moved him closer to his destination while he rested. The road is still waiting, yet he is not the same traveler who entered the shade. His breathing is steadier, his strength has returned. The sun remains high, but it no longer feels impossible. He steps back into the light, carrying the memory of the shadow. He knows there may be another shelter somewhere ahead. More importantly, he knows what it feels like to be covered. This is what time with God gives a person. It does not always provide a complete map. It gives enough strength for the next part of the road. It does not reveal every answer. It reminds the traveler who is guiding them. It does not promise that the heat will never return. It teaches the heart where to seek shade. The secret place becomes something carried within, a prayer remembered during a difficult conversation, a promise repeated while waiting, a moment of stillness before responding in anger, a quiet awareness that God is near even in a crowded room. There are people who believe they do not have time to dwell with God. Their mornings begin quickly. Their days are filled with responsibilities. Children need attention. Work begins early. Messages arrive before breakfast. By evening, their minds are exhausted. The idea of creating a long, perfect devotional routine feels impossible. But dwelling is not measured only by the length of time spent in silence. It is shaped by the direction of the heart throughout the day. A person may turn toward God while washing dishes, walking through a hallway, waiting at a red light, or lying awake at night. They may say, "Be with me in this conversation. Give me patience. Help me see this person with mercy. Keep my heart close to you." These prayers create small openings through which awareness returns. The purpose is not to make every moment feel religious. It is to recognize that no moment is outside the reach of God. The secret place can exist in an office, a classroom, a hospital corridor, a grocery store, a factory, or a quiet home. It is not limited by architecture. A beautiful church may help the heart become still, but God's presence does not remain inside its walls after the doors close. The Most High is near when someone sits beneath stained glass. But He is also near when someone cries inside a bathroom when no one can see. He is near when hymns fill a sanctuary, and He is near when the only prayer a person can offer is a silent breath. Still, the secret place is not simply a comforting emotion of. It is not pretending that everything will be fine. It is not using spiritual words to avoid difficult decisions. Sometimes dwelling with God brings a peace that helps a person wait. At other times, it brings conviction that tells them to act. It may give courage to ask for help, leave a dangerous situation, apologize, seek wise counsel, visit a doctor, or face a truth they have been avoiding. God's shelter does not make people passive. It makes them less controlled by panic. From that place, they can see more clearly. Fear often demands immediate movement. Send the message now. Make the decision now. Assume the worst now. Defend yourself now. Escape before you understand what is happening. But the secret place teaches the soul to pause, not forever, and not as a way to avoid responsibility, but long enough to ask, what is true, what is wise, what response reflects trust rather than panic? Many painful choices have been made because fear convinced someone that urgency was the same as wisdom. Yet under God's shadow, urgency can become quieter. The heart remembers that it does not need to outrun a future already held by Him. The person from the quiet house carries Psalm 91 into the morning lee. They prepare a simple breakfast. Water boils, sunlight begins to fill the kitchen. The worries have not disappeared, but they no longer move through the mind without being questioned. When fear says, "You will not be able to handle what happens," another thought rises. "I do not have to handle it alone." When fear says, "You are completely exposed," the words return, "The shelter of the Most High." When fear says, "God is far away," the person remembers the prayer from the night before. "Teach me to dwell." Before leaving the house, they stand near the door for a moment. Their hand rests on the handle. Beyond it waits the day with all its ordinary demands and unknown possibilities. They do not feel invincible. They are not certain that everything will go well, but certainty is no longer the requirement for taking the next step. They take one breath and quietly say, "You are with me." Then they open the door. This may be what the secret place looks like in real life. Not a person escaping every hard moment, but someone carrying the awareness of God into it. Not someone who never feels fear, but someone who knows fear is not the only voice present. Not someone who has mastered the future, but someone who has surrendered it. The enemy cannot see this place because it is hidden inside relationship. Circumstances may touch the body, the schedule, the finances, or the emotions, but the deepest part of the person remains held by God. Yet Psalm 91 does not leave us only with the image of a shelter. A shelter is strong, but it can also feel distant. A fortress protects, but its walls are cold. God knows that the frightened heart does not only need strength above it, it needs tenderness around it. So the psalm moves from stone to feathers, from walls to wings, from the safety of a structure to the closeness of a living presence. The next image is small enough for a child to understand and deep enough to comfort a soul at the end of its strength. A storm crosses an open field, the wind grows stronger, the sky darkens, and somewhere near the ground, a mother bird gathers her young beneath her wings. The storm does not stop before she covers them because the storm has come. And beneath those wings, Psalm 91 reveals something many frightened people have forgotten. God's protection is not only powerful enough to defend you, it is gentle enough to draw you close. There are moments when strength alone is not enough. A fortress can keep danger out, but it cannot hold a frightened heart. A wall can stand between a person and the storm, but it cannot whisper that they are loved. Psalm 91 understands this. After describing God as a shelter, a shadow, a refuge, and a fortress, the psalm moves toward an image that is softer, closer, and deeply personal. It speaks of wings. It tells us that God covers His people, and beneath His faithfulness they find refuge. The change in imagery is easy to miss, but it reveals something essential about the character of God. He is not only powerful enough to defend, He is gentle enough to draw the vulnerable near. He does not merely place protection around His people from a distance, He brings them close enough to feel that they are not alone. Imagine an open field beneath a sky that has begun to darken. The air has changed. Birds that were moving freely moments earlier now fly low toward the trees. Grass bends as the wind gathers strength. In the distance, thunder rolls across the hills. Rain has not yet begun, but the storm is already present in the silence before it. Near the edge of the field, a small bird watches over her young. They are too small to understand the sky. They do not know why the light has disappeared or why the wind has become cold. They only know that something unfamiliar is approaching. The mother bird lowers herself and spreads her wings. One by one, the young move beneath them. The storm does not stop before she gathers them. The sky does not become clear. The wind does not ask permission before it arrives. She covers them because the danger is real. Soon the rain begins. Drops strike the earth, then come faster. The wind moves across the field in waves. The small birds beneath the wings can still hear the storm. They can feel the movement around them. They are not placed inside a world where thunder does not exist, yet they are covered inside the world where it does. The body of the mother stands between them and the force of the rain. Her wings become their shelter. Her nearness becomes their safety. They do not survive because they understand the weather. They survive because they remain close to the one who does. This is one of the most tender pictures of God in Scripture. It does not present him as distant, impatient, or unmoved by human fear. It shows him as one who sees the vulnerable and draws them near. Many people can believe that God is powerful. They believe he created the heavens, divided seas, guided nations, and worked miracles. Yet they struggle to believe that his power is gentle toward them. They can imagine God ruling the universe, but they find it harder to imagine him paying attention to the fear they carry into a quiet room. They believe he notices wars, disasters, and the great movements of history, but they wonder whether he notices the trembling before a medical appointment, the loneliness of an empty house, the disappointment behind a polite smile, or the prayer someone is too tired to finish. The image of wings answers that question. God does not only see danger in large, dramatic forms. He notices the small creature searching for shelter. He sees the heart that feels overwhelmed by something others may consider ordinary. What seems small from the outside may feel enormous to the person living through it. A conversation can feel like a storm. A letter can change the atmosphere of an entire home. A delayed phone call can fill the mind with fear. A few words from someone trusted can wound more deeply than a stranger would ever know. God does not measure pain only by how visible it appears. He understands what each burden weighs inside the person carrying it. The person from the quiet house has now entered the day. The morning is brighter, but the concerns from the night remain. They sit in a waiting room beneath white lights. A clock hangs on the wall. Other people sit nearby, looking at phones or speaking in quiet voices. Every few minutes, a door opens and a name is called. The person holds a small folder in both hands. They have already prayed, but fear continues to rise in waves. They remember Psalm 91 and the image of wings. At first, the thought feels almost too gentle for the moment. They want an answer. They want certainty. They want God to guarantee that the news will be good. But no such guarantee has been given. Instead, they hear a quieter invitation within the heart. Come closer. This is often the place where faith becomes difficult. People ask God for information, but he first offers presence. They ask for the road ahead, but he gives enough light for the next step. They ask for the storm to stop, but he spreads his wings while it is still approaching. Presence can feel smaller than an answer when fear is demanding control. Yet presence is often what makes it possible to survive the waiting. The person in the waiting room cannot see beyond the closed door. They do not know what will be said, but they can choose where their heart will remain during the uncertainty. They take a slow breath and whisper, "Cover me here." There is no visible change in the room. No one else hears the prayer. The clock continues moving. But inside, the person begins to imagine that they are not sitting alone beneath the harsh light. They are beneath a greater covering. The fear remains, yet it no longer fills every part of the mind. There is room for another truth. God is present before the answer, during the answer, and after the answer. Whatever happens beyond the door will not be encountered outside his sight. Some people find it difficult to accept this tenderness because they have learned to hide weaknesses. From an early age, they were praised for being strong. They became the dependable one, the person who solved problems, helped others, and remained calm when everyone else was falling apart. Over time, they discovered that people often feel safe around those who appear unshaken, so they learned to manage their pain privately. They smiled while exhausted. They gave advice while quietly losing hope. They said, "I am fine," because explaining the truth felt too complicated. They became skilled at functioning while frightened. But strength can become a lonely room when a person never allows themselves to be covered. The image of wings challenges the belief that mature faith must always look composed. The young birds beneath the wings are not praised for pretending the storm is harmless. They are safe because they move closer. Their vulnerability is not a failure. It is the reason the shelter matters. God does not ask the weary to prove their strength before coming near. He does not say, "Return when you have stopped trembling." He says, in effect, "Because you are trembling, come closer." Throughout the Bible, people approach God with emotions that are not organized. They come with grief, anger, confusion, shame, and fear. Some pray with confidence, others cry out with barely enough hope to speak. God does not reject them because their feelings are complicated. He meets them in truth. The Psalms themselves are filled with honest emotion because faith was never meant to be an act performed for God. It is a relationship lived before Him. A person can say, "I trust you," and also say, "I am afraid." These statements are not always enemies. Sometimes trust is the decision to bring fear into the presence of God rather than allowing fear to carry the heart away from Him. There is a difference between hiding fear and hiding in God. Hiding fear means denying it, covering it with activity, or pretending it does not exist. Hiding in God means bringing fear into His presence and allowing His truth to surround it. One form creates distance, the other creates intimacy. One says, "I must solve this before I can be at peace." The other says, "I will come near even before I know how this will end." Under His wings, a person does not have to impress anyone. There is no audience. There is no need for perfect sentences. The heart may simply say, "This hurts." It may say, "I do not understand." It may admit, "I am angry." It may confess, "I am afraid you will not come through for me." Honesty like this can feel dangerous, especially for those who were taught that doubt is disrespectful. But God already knows the thoughts beneath the words. Hiding them does not protect Him. And it does not protect us. It only makes the relationship more distant. The wings of God are wide enough for honest questions. The waiting room door opens, and the person's name is called. They stand. Their legs feel unsteady, but they move forward. The hallway is quiet. The person walking ahead speaks kindly, but the words are difficult to hear through the noise of the heart. Before entering the next room, the person remembers one phrase, "Beneath His wings." They do not feel brave, they simply feel accompanied. This is how God's protection sometimes appears. It is not always the removal of a frightening moment. Sometimes it is the grace to enter that moment without being spiritually abandoned. A person may still hear words they did not want to hear. They may still face a process they did not choose, yet something within remains connected to God. The storm may shake the field, but the heart is not left uncovered. Psalm 91 also connects the image of wings with God's faithfulness. His faithfulness becomes a shield and protection. This matters because human feelings are unstable. 1 hour, a person may feel close to God; the next, fear may return. One day, prayer may feel natural; the next, every word may feel empty. If safety depended on the consistency of human emotion, no one could truly rest. But the psalm does not say that our feelings become a shield, it says His faithfulness does. God's faithfulness is not a mood. It is not a temporary kindness. It is not dependent on a person having a good day, a strong prayer, or a perfect record. Faithfulness is part of who He is. He remains true when human understanding becomes weak. He remembers when people forget. He keeps watch when they sleep. He does not become distracted by the size of the world or tired of hearing the same prayer. His care is not reduced because millions of other people also need Him. The God who holds the universe is not forced to divide His attention the way human beings do. A parent with several children may sometimes feel pulled in many directions. A doctor can only see one patient at a time. A friend may care deeply but still miss a call or forget an important date. Human love is real, but human attention is limited. God's attention is not limited in this way. He can be fully present with the person in the hospital, the parent beside the child's bed, the traveler on the road, the elderly woman in the quiet house, and the young believer praying for the first time. No one receives a smaller portion of His awareness because someone else is also in need. This can be difficult for the human mind to understand, but it is essential to the comfort of Psalm 91. The wings are not crowded, the shelter does not become full. No one arrives too late and finds that God has no more room. His presence does not become exhausted by repeated sorrow. A person may return with the same fear many times, and God does not say, "You should have overcome this by now." Growth matters, but mercy remains available during the process. Consider a child who wakes after a frightening dream. The room is the same one where the child safely fell asleep, but in the darkness it feels unfamiliar. Shapes look threatening. A coat hanging near the door becomes a stranger. The silence feels filled with danger. The child calls out, and a parent enters. The parent may turn on a small light, sit beside the bed, and explain that the room is safe. Yet the deepest comfort does not come from the explanation. It comes from the parent remaining nearby. The child does not understand every shadow, but the presence of someone trusted changes the meaning of the room. Many adults carry fears in the same way. They may understand logically that the worst outcome has not occurred. They may know that some of their thoughts are exaggerated. They may repeat helpful truths, yet their bodies still react as if danger is near. In such moments, shame often makes the fear worse. They tell themselves, "I should not feel this way. I should be stronger. I should trust God more." But shame does not calm the frightened heart. Compassion does. The image of God covering His people with wings invites the heart to receive compassion rather than accusation. God may bring peace through prayer, but He may also provide help through people. Wise guidance, healthy routines, professional support, medical care, and honest conversations. Trusting God does not mean refusing the forms of help He places within reach. The mother bird's wings are part of how protection comes to the young. In human life, protection may come through a doctor who listens carefully, a friend who notices a change, a counselor who helps untangle fear, a pastor who speaks with wisdom, or a family member who quietly stays nearby. These forms of help do not compete with faith. They may be expressions of God's care. Sometimes people pray for supernatural protection while overlooking the ordinary protection already being offered. They ask God to rescue them from exhaustion, but refuse to rest. They ask for peace, but continue feeding the mind with fear. They ask for guidance, but avoid every wise voice that might challenge them. They ask for safety while remaining in situations that repeatedly cause harm. God's covering is not permission to ignore wisdom. His protection often works through the courage to make a difficult but healthy choice. Under his wings, the heart can become still enough to listen. Fear speaks quickly and loudly. Wisdom is often quieter. Panic says, "Act now or everything will collapse." God's presence may say, "Pause, tell the truth, ask for help, do not carry this in secret." Panic says, "You must control every possible outcome." God's presence says, "Originate, take the next faithful step and release what is beyond your reach." Panic says, "Your value depends on whether this works." God's presence says, "You are loved before the result is known." The person in the medical office eventually hears the news. Perhaps it is not the worst possibility they imagined. Perhaps more tests are needed. Perhaps the road ahead will be difficult but manageable. The details matter, but something deeper has also taken place. During the waiting, the person discovered that God's presence was not dependent on receiving the answer they wanted. They entered the room afraid, but not abandoned. They leave with questions, but also with the memory that they were covered there. On the way home, they stop at a red light. Rain begins again, lightly this time. Drops move slowly down the windshield. In the car beside them, a parent turns toward a child in the back seat and smiles. The ordinary scene awakens the image of wings again. Protection is often quiet. It happens in movements so familiar that people barely notice them. A hand reaching across a table, a blanket placed over someone who has fallen asleep, a message that says, "I am here." A meal left at the door, a prayer spoken over a name. The world may consider these things small, but love often protects through small acts repeated faithfully. This is also how God teaches his people to become shelter for one another. Those who have rested beneath his wings are called to extend compassion to others, not to become someone else's savior, but to reflect the safety they have received. A person can become a quiet place where another feels free to tell the truth. They can listen without rushing to correct. They can sit beside grief without offering simple explanations. They can pray without turning pain into a sermon. They can remind the frightened that they are not alone. Too often, suffering people are given advice when they need presence. Someone speaks about a loss, and another person quickly explains why it happened. Someone admits fear, and they are told to have more faith. Someone expresses doubt, and they are given a list of verses before their pain has even been heard. Truth matters, but truth without tenderness can feel like another burden. The wings of God teach a different way. Cover first, draw near, let the person know they are seen. Then, when the heart is ready, truth can be heard as comfort rather than correction. Jesus reflected this tenderness throughout his earthly life. He noticed people others overlooked. He stopped for those the crowd considered interruptions. He touched the untouchable, welcomed children, listened to the desperate, and spoke gently to those carrying shame. His strength did not make him harsh. His holiness did not make him distant from human pain. The closer people came to him in honest need, the more clearly they encountered mercy. This is important because some people imagine God primarily through the harshest human authority they have known. If a parent was easily angered, they may expect God to be impatient. If a leader used fear to control, they may assume God does the same. If love was withdrawn whenever they failed, they may believe God's presence must also be earned. But the image of wings corrects these distorted pictures. God's holiness is real, and his wisdom is greater than ours. Yet his heart toward those who seek refuge is not cruel. The frightened are not driven away. They are gathered close. There is another detail in the image of wings. To be covered, the young birds must remain near. They cannot receive the shelter while running in every direction. In the same way, fear often scatters the human heart. It pulls attention toward imagined futures, past regrets, other people's opinions, and every possible threat. The mind moves so quickly that prayer becomes difficult. Dwelling under God's wings involves gathering the scattered parts of the heart and bringing them back to one place. This may happen through a simple practice. A person notices the mind racing and asks, "What is actually happening right now?" Perhaps right now they are sitting in a room, they are breathing, they have not yet received the news they fear, the conversation has not yet happened, the future has not arrived. Then they ask, "What do I know about God right now? He is present, He sees, He is faithful, He will provide wisdom for the next step." These questions do not deny danger. They bring the heart back from imaginary storms into the shelter of present grace. God usually gives grace for the moment being lived, not for every imagined future at once. A person may look toward the next year and feel unable to bear everything it might contain, but they are not being asked to carry the entire year today. They are being invited to receive grace for this morning, this conversation, this appointment, this decision, this breath. Tomorrow will have its own mercy when tomorrow comes. The young birds beneath the wings do not need enough strength for the entire storm. They only need to remain covered moment by moment. This is how many people survive seasons they once believed would destroy them. They do not receive a lifetime of strength all at once. They receive enough for the next hour. A friend arrives, a meal is eaten, a prayer is spoken. The night passes, morning comes. Then another day is lived. Looking back, the person realizes that God's faithfulness appeared not as one enormous gift, but as thousands of small mercies. The person from the quiet house begins to notice these mercies. The appointment is over. A plan has been made. There are still uncertainties, but the day continues. Sunlight breaks through the clouds. A friend sends a message without knowing how perfectly timed it is. At home, a warm drink waits on the table. The Bible remains open. None of these things solve everything, yet together they form a kind of shelter. The person sees that divine protection may sometimes feel less like a wall descending from heaven and more like grace arriving through ordinary moments. That evening, they sit near the window again. The same room that held fear the night before now holds a different silence. They read the line about being covered beneath God's wings. They think about the office, the hallway, the closed door, and the breath they took before entering. God did not prevent them from walking into uncertainty. He met them there. The storm was not avoided, but they were covered within it. They begin to pray for others, for the person sleeping in a hospital room tonight, for the parent waiting beside a phone, for the child afraid of what tomorrow will bring, for the worker who fears losing a job, for the person grieving in a silent house, for the one who believes they must remain strong for everyone else. The prayer is simple. Draw them close. Let them know they are not alone. Perhaps someone listening to this story carries a fear they have not spoken aloud. Perhaps they appear calm during the day, but the fear returns when the room becomes quiet. Perhaps they have asked God for help and wondered whether He heard. Perhaps they feel ashamed because their faith has not removed their anxiety. Psalm 91 does not demand that they become fearless before coming near. It offers wings for the frightened. You do not have to wait until you feel worthy of comfort. You do not have to create the perfect prayer. You do not have to explain every part of the storm. You may simply come. You may say, "God, I do not know how to carry this." You may sit in silence. You may repeat one line. You may cry. The shelter does not become weaker because your faith feels small. Its strength comes from Him. There will be times when God's protection is visible. A danger will pass. A door will close. A clear answer will come. There will also be times when protection is hidden within endurance, wisdom, peace, and unexpected help. In both, His faithfulness remains the shield. The person beneath His wings may still feel the rain, but they are not exposed to it alone. Yet Psalm 91 is not sentimental. It does not remain only with gentle images. It knows that storms can take darker forms. It speaks about terror in the night, arrows in the day, danger that moves unseen, and destruction that appears without warning. The psalm does not hide these realities, it names them. Why would a song about safety speak so openly about fear? Why would Scripture describe the very dangers the anxious mind is trying to forget? Perhaps because God's comfort is not built on denial. He does not protect His people by pretending the night is harmless. He teaches them how to live when the night is real. The room grows dark again. The person closes the Bible, but one image remains. Wings spread wide over the vulnerable while the storm moves across the field. The young are not safe because the weather became gentle. They are safe because they stayed near the one who covered them. And soon, Psalm 91 will lead us into the darkness where many fears become strongest, the hours when ordinary sounds grow louder, unanswered questions feel heavier, and the mind begins to imagine dangers that have not yet arrived. It will speak of the terror by night, but before we enter that darkness, remember this. The night may be real, the storm may be strong, and your heart may still tremble. Yet trembling does not place you outside God's care. It may be the very reason He is calling you closer. Night has a way of making ordinary fears feel larger. During the day, the mind is occupied by movement, voices, responsibilities, and familiar routines. There are doors to open, people to answer, meals to prepare, and tasks that demand attention. Even when worry is present, the noise of life can keep it at a distance. But when evening comes, the house becomes quiet, the lights are turned off, and the world seems to withdraw. In that stillness, thoughts that were hidden beneath the day begin to rise. A concern that seemed manageable in the afternoon suddenly feels impossible after midnight. A delayed answer becomes a sign of disaster. A familiar pain becomes evidence of the worst possibility. A mistake from years ago returns with such clarity that it feels as though it happened yesterday. The future opens before the imagination, and every path seems to lead toward loss. This is why Psalm 91 does not speak vaguely about fear. It names the terror of the night. It understands that some battles do not arrive with visible armies. They enter through darkness, silence, memory, and uncertainty. The person from the quiet house lies awake again. The medical appointment has passed, but it did not bring complete certainty. More questions remain. Another test has been scheduled. The doctor's words were calm, yet several phrases continue repeating in the mind. During the day, the person managed to speak with family, answer messages, and complete ordinary tasks. They even laughed once or twice. But now the bedroom is dark, and there is nothing left to distract the heart. A clock glows near the bed. The numbers move slowly from 1 hour to the next. Each time the person closes their eyes, the mind creates another possible future. In one, the news becomes worse. In another, the family is overwhelmed. In another, plans disappear and life changes completely. None of these things has happened, but the body reacts as though they are happening now. The heart beats faster, breathing becomes shallow, the hands feel cold. Fear has taken possibilities from tomorrow and brought them into the present. This is one of fear's most exhausting powers. It makes a person suffer events that have not occurred. It tells the mind that imagination is preparation. It suggests that if every possible disaster is rehearsed in advance, the heart will somehow be protected when difficulty comes. But fear does not prepare the soul. It drains it. It asks the body to carry tomorrow's weight with today's strength. It turns uncertainty into 1,000 invisible burdens, then demands that one person lift all of them at once. The person in the bed knows this logically. They know the future cannot be controlled through worry. They know that thinking about the same question repeatedly will not create a new answer. Yet fear does not always respond to logic. It continues speaking because its purpose is not merely to inform. Its purpose is to rule. Psalm 91 offers a different voice. It says that the one who dwells with God will not have to live under the rule of the terror by night. This does not mean frightening thoughts will never appear. It does not mean faithful people will never wake with a racing heart. It does not mean darkness loses all emotional power. The psalm is not describing a person who becomes incapable of feeling fear. It is describing a person whose fear is no longer the highest authority. The terror may speak, but it does not get the final word. The night may feel threatening, but it does not become greater than the God who watches through it. There is an important difference between fear appearing and fear ruling. Fear appearing is part of being human. The body was created to recognize danger. A sudden sound makes a person turn. A warning causes attention to sharpen. Concern can lead someone to seek help, prepare wisely, or avoid unnecessary harm. Not every fear is an enemy. Some fears are signals, but fear becomes a ruler when it begins controlling every decision, interpreting every silence, and defining every possibility. Under its rule, uncertainty always means disaster. Delay always means rejection. Pain always means destruction. And silence always means abandonment. Fear takes one difficult fact and builds an entire hopeless future around it. The person in the bedroom turns on the small lamp beside the bed. The light is soft, but it changes the room. Shadows retreat toward the corners. The Bible is still on the table. They open to Psalm 91 and find the words about the terror by night and the arrow that flies by day. The verse does not say that the night contains nothing frightening. It says the person who rests in God does not need to be ruled by it. The person reads the line several times. At first, it feels almost impossible. How can someone simply decide not to be afraid? Can faith command the body to stop trembling? Can a verse immediately silence every anxious thought? Perhaps the psalm is not asking for emotional denial. Perhaps it is inviting the person to move their attention from what fear imagines toward what God has revealed. Fear says, something terrible may be waiting in the darkness. Faith replies, God is already present in every place I cannot see. Fear says, you will not have enough strength if the worst happens. Faith replies, I am not being asked to carry a future that has not arrived. Grace will meet me when the moment comes. Fear says, you are unprotected because you do not know the outcome. Faith replies, my protection is not based on knowing the outcome. It is based on belonging to God. These answers do not always make fear disappear instantly. Sometimes they must be repeated. A frightened mind may need to return to the same truth 10 times, 50 times, or every hour through a long night. This repetition is not failure. It is the practice of dwelling. A person does not leave the shelter because the wind becomes loud. They move deeper inside it. In the same way, each return to truth is a movement toward the center of God's presence. The person closes their eyes and takes one slow breath. Instead of trying to solve the entire future, they ask a smaller question. What is true in this room right now? The answer is simple. They are lying in bed. The next appointment has not yet arrived. Their family is asleep nearby. The air is moving quietly through the room. They are breathing. God is present. They have enough grace for this moment. Then they ask another question. What has fear added that I do not actually know? The answer becomes clearer. Fear has added conclusions. It has turned uncertainty into certainty of loss. It has imagined conversations that have not happened and pain that has not yet come. The facts are difficult, but the story fear has created around them is even heavier. This distinction matters. Faith does not require ignoring facts. It does not ask someone to pretend that a diagnosis, financial problem, broken relationship, or dangerous situation is unimportant. Biblical trust is not a refusal to see reality. It is the refusal to believe that visible reality is the whole reality. There may be a problem, but God is still present. There may be pain, but grace is still available. There may be danger, but wisdom can still be given. There may be loss, but love has not lost its meaning. There may be a night, but the night does not cancel the coming morning. The arrow that flies by day represents another kind of fear. Some dangers hide in darkness, while others move openly beneath the sun. There are moments when uncertainty is no longer imagined. The letter arrives, the phone rings, the conversation happens, the loss becomes real. The threat is no longer something the mind has invented, it has entered the day. People sometimes find visible trouble easier to face than invisible fear because at least it has a name. Yet visible trouble brings its own pain. It demands decisions. It changes plans. It can make a person feel as though life has become divided into a before and an after. Imagine a father sitting at a kitchen table in the morning. Sunlight enters through the window, and a cup of coffee grows cold near his hand. An envelope lies open in front of him. The company where he has worked for many years is reducing its staff, and his position is gone. The words are clear. There is no mystery to solve. He knows what has happened. His first thought is not about himself. It is about the people depending on him. The mortgage, the school expenses, the groceries. And the ordinary needs of the family move through his mind. He hears movement in another room and folds the letter quickly, not because he wants to lie, but because he does not yet know how to speak the news aloud. This is an arrow by day. It arrives in full light. It cannot be dismissed as imagination. Faith does not ask this father to smile and pretend the loss does not matter. It allows him to feel the shock, the disappointment, and the fear. But it also invites him to remember that his job was never the deepest source of his worth, and his company was never the ultimate source of his provision. Those truths do not pay the next bill by themselves. They do not remove the need to search, plan, ask for help, or make difficult decisions. But they protect the heart from believing that one lost position means a lost future. The father lowers his head at the kitchen table. He does not know how to pray. For years he has been the person others depended upon. Now he feels uncertain, embarrassed, and strangely ashamed, as though losing the job means he failed to protect his family. He begins with only a few words. God, I do not know what to do. The prayer feels incomplete, but it is honest. He sits in silence, then another thought comes. Tell the truth, do not carry this alone. He calls his wife into the room and shows her the letter. For a moment, neither speaks. Then she reaches across the table and takes his hand. They are still frightened, but the burden has changed because it is no longer hidden. God's protection often begins by bringing what is hidden into the light. Fear grows in secrecy. It tells people that they must remain silent because others will think less of them, worry too much, or fail to understand. It says that strength means carrying everything privately. But hidden fear can become a closed room where hopelessness speaks without interruption. When the truth is shared with someone trustworthy, another voice enters the room. Prayer, compassion, wisdom, and practical help become possible. The father and his wife do not receive a dramatic answer that morning. No new job appears before lunch. Yet protection has already taken a form. Shame did not isolate him. Fear did not prevent honest conversation. The family begins planning together. A friend later hears what happened and mentions an opportunity. Another person offers advice. The road remains uncertain, but the arrow does not destroy the heart. This is not a lesser miracle. It is the quiet defense of God's faithfulness. Psalm 91 speaks about dangers that move in darkness and destruction that appears at midday. The language covers the full experience of human vulnerability, night and day, seen and unseen, imagined and real, private fears and public crises. There is no hour outside God's awareness. The person who wakes in darkness and the person who receives painful news beneath the morning sun are both invited beneath the same shadow. Yet some fears are not about the future. They come from the past. Night can open doors to memories that the day keeps closed. A person may lie awake and remember words they wish they could take back, opportunities they missed, relationships they damaged, or choices whose consequences still remain. Regret enters the room and begins speaking in the language of finality. You ruined everything. You cannot be forgiven. You will always be the person who made that mistake. Unlike anxiety, which imagines pain ahead, regret keeps a person trapped behind. It asks them to relive what cannot be changed. Consider a woman sitting alone in a quiet apartment. Years earlier, she made a decision that affected someone she loved. She apologized, but the relationship never fully recovered. During the day, she functions well. She works, speaks kindly, and helps others. But at night, the memory returns. She has asked God for forgiveness many times, yet she still punishes herself. She believes in grace for other people, but her own failure feels different. She reads promises about mercy and silently adds an exception. Surely not for me. This is another terror of the night, the fear that the past is stronger than grace. It does not threaten the body, it accuses the soul. It tells the person that God may forgive in theory but remain disappointed in practice. It transforms repentance into permanent self-condemnation. But the protection of God includes protection from lies about His mercy. Forgiveness does not always erase consequences, repair every relationship, or remove every painful memory. Yet when repentance is genuine, shame no longer has the right to define the person's identity. The woman opens her Bible and sees the familiar words about refugee. She realizes that she has been trying to dwell inside her worst moment instead of dwelling in God. She has made the memory her home. Every time hope begins to rise, she returns to the old room and sits beneath the same accusation. But grace invites her to leave, not to deny what happened, not to minimize the pain caused, not to avoid responsibility. Grace allows her to tell the truth about sin without believing sin is the truest thing about her forever. She whispers, God, I have confessed this, but I keep trying to punish myself. The words surprise her. She has always thought self-punishment was a form of humility, but perhaps it has become another attempt to control what only grace can heal. If she keeps suffering enough, maybe she can pay for the past. Yet the Christian message is not that people save themselves through endless guilt. It is that mercy is received because God's love is greater than human failure. The night does not erase the memory, but its meaning begins to change. The memory becomes a place where she sees both the seriousness of her choice and the depth of God's mercy. She may still need to make amends where possible. She may still need to accept that some consequences cannot be reversed, but she no longer needs to wake each night and place herself on trial again. The judge she feared is also the one who offers refuge. Fear often distorts the image of God. It imagines him standing at a distance with folded arms, watching to see whether people will fail. It assumes that every hardship is proof of his anger, and every delay is evidence that he has withdrawn. But Psalm 91 presents God as shelter. He is not waiting for the frightened to become worthy before allowing them near. He is the one toward whom they run because they have nowhere else to go. This does not mean that God approves of every human choice or protects people from all consequences. Love without truth would not be love, but truth without mercy would leave no one with hope. God's protection works through both. He exposes what is harmful and provides a path back. He may interrupt plans, close doors, bring conviction, or allow uncomfortable truth to surface. These moments can feel painful, yet they may be forms of rescue. Sometimes people ask God to protect them from danger, while unknowingly walking toward it. They pray for peace but remain attached to habits that destroy peace. They ask for healthy relationships while ignoring clear patterns of manipulation or harm. They ask for guidance but continue choosing whatever requires the least surrender. Protection may come as discomfort. A friendship becomes strained because truth is spoken. A plan fails. A hidden issue is revealed. A person is forced to face something they would rather avoid. In the moment, it may feel as though God has removed his covering. Later, they may see that he was preventing a deeper wound. The father who lost his job may eventually discover that the position had been slowly consuming his family life. The woman carrying regret may find that facing her past allows her to become a compassionate guide for someone else. The person waiting for medical answers may learn to receive care instead of always being the strong one. These outcomes do not make the painful event good by themselves, but they reveal that God can work within what he did not delight in, bringing wisdom, connection, and transformation from places that once seemed empty. Still, there are nights when no meaning can be found. Some pain should not be explained too quickly. There are losses so deep that any immediate lesson sounds cruel. In those moments, God's protection may not come through understanding. It may come through his refusal to leave. The heart does not need a reason before it is allowed to grieve. It may need only the assurance that tears are seen and that silence is not empty. Imagine a parent sitting in a child's darkened room after the child has fallen asleep. The child has been ill, and the parent has spent many nights listening to every breath. A small lamp casts warm light across the wall. Toys remain scattered near the bed. The parent is exhausted beyond words. They have prayed for healing, wisdom, and protection. Some days bring improvement, other days bring new concern. Friends ask how they are doing, and the parent says, "We are taking it one day at a time." The phrase sounds simple, but it contains an entire world of courage. During the night, the parent rests one hand near the sleeping child and repeats a short prayer. "You love this child more than I do." It is not an attempt to care less. It is a recognition that human love reaches a limit. The parent cannot control every cell, every breath, or every outcome. They can follow medical advice, provide comfort, remain attentive, and pray. Beyond that, they must place the child into hands larger than their own. This surrender is one of the most painful forms of trusting. People often think surrender should feel peaceful immediately. Sometimes it does. At other times, surrender must be repeated through tears. "I place this in your hands." Then fear takes it back. "I place this in your hands again." The cycle continues through the night. This is not false faith. It is real faith practiced under pressure. The parent may not feel courageous, but courage is not always a strong emotion. Sometimes courage is remaining present when running away would feel easier. It is making the next phone call, attending the next appointment, asking the next question, preparing the next meal, or sitting beside the bed for one more hour. God's protection may appear as the strength to continue loving without being destroyed by the fear of loss. The terror by night tells people that because they feel afraid, they have already failed. Psalm 91 says otherwise. The presence of fear does not prove the absence of God. Many of the most faithful prayers in Scripture were spoken from places of anguish. Trust can exist in a trembling voice. Hope can exist beside tears. Peace can begin while the body is still tired. The person from the quiet house reads the psalm again. They notice that it does not command them to understand every danger. It redirects their awareness toward God's character. Shelter, shadow, refuge, fortress, wings, faithfulness. Each image answers a different need. When the person feels exposed, God is shelter. When the heat becomes unbearable, He is shadow. When fear pursues, He is refuge. When lies attack, He is fortress. When the heart feels small, He offers wings. When emotions change, His faithfulness remains. The person begins to repeat these words slowly, almost like breathing. You are my shelter. You are my refuge. You are faithful. The prayer is not used as a magical formula. The words are reminders. They return the mind to what fear has hidden. After several minutes, the body begins to relax. The person does not feel joyful. They do not receive a vision or an explanation, but the sense of being completely alone begins to loosen. Outside, the night continues. Somewhere, an ambulance moves along a distant road. In another home, a family is praying. In a hospital, someone sits beneath fluorescent light. At an airport, a traveler waits for news. In a small apartment, a person grieves. In a crowded city, someone feels invisible. The darkness holds countless stories, but not one of them is hidden from God. This is one reason the biblical image of God watching through the night is so powerful. Human beings must sleep. Even the most loving parent eventually closes their eyes. Doctors change shifts. Friends put their phones away. Guards become tired. But God does not lose awareness when the world becomes dark. He is not less present at 3 in the morning than at noon. The hour that feels most lonely to a human heart is fully visible to Him. Yet God's watchfulness is not anxious. He does not stand over creation with fear, wondering what might happen next. His attention is steady. This matters because people often imagine divine care as a larger version of human worry. They think God protects by being as nervous as they are, only more powerful. But His care is not panic. He sees completely and remains at peace. To rest beneath His shadow is to place the heart near that steadiness. The person in the bedroom imagines handing each fear to God one by one. The medical test, the family, the finances, the future, the mistakes, the things outside their control. They do not know what it means for God to hold them, but the image helps. For a few moments, the burdens are no longer piled together. Each one is named and released. Some immediately return to the mind, and the person releases them again. Prayer sometimes works like this, not one final surrender, but a repeated opening of the hands. People may feel frustrated when fear returns after prayer. They assume the prayer failed, but prayer is not always a door that closes permanently behind worry. It may be the path by which the heart returns each time worry wanders away from trust. Over time, this returning creates a new habit. Fear may still knock, but it no longer knows the house as well as it once did. The heart begins recognizing its patterns. This is the thought that always arrives when I am tired. This is the conclusion I make when I feel rejected. This is the memory that returns when I believe God is disappointed. Recognition creates space. Instead of immediately believing the thought, the person can bring it into God's presence. This is where practical wisdom and spiritual trust work together. A person struggling with repeated nighttime fear may need prayer, but they may also need rest, honest conversation, reduced exposure to disturbing information, medical guidance, or professional support. Seeking help is not evidence of weak faith. It can be one of the ways a person steps into protection. God's care is not limited to extraordinary intervention. He often works through wise people, healthy boundaries, treatment, community, and daily choices. The terror by night grows stronger when a person is physically exhausted. A tired mind loses perspective. Small concerns become enormous. The body and soul are not separate enemies. Caring for one can support the other. Sleep, nourishment, movement, and quiet can become acts of humility, ways of admitting that human beings are created with limits. There is no holiness in ignoring those limits until the heart collapses. Jesus himself rested, withdrew from crowds, and accepted human care. Needing rest is not a spiritual defect. Sometimes the most faithful thing a frightened person can do is stop trying to solve everything and sleep. This may feel irresponsible because worry presents itself as duty. It says, if you stop thinking, you stop caring. But love is not measured by how many hours someone remains awake imagining disaster. The person beside the bed closes the Bible and turns off the lamp. This time, before lying down, they speak one final prayer. God, you will remain awake, so I do not have to. The sentence feels almost strange. For weeks, they have lived as though their worry were helping God manage the future. Now they begin to see that worry has been an attempt to keep watch over things only God can hold. They lie down. The questions remain, but the heart is tired of answering questions that have no answers tonight. The person places one hand over their chest and listens to their breathing. Each breath becomes a small surrender. Here, now, God is near. Here, now, enough grace for this moment. Minutes pass. The room remains dark. A thought returns. What if the next test is bad? The person answers gently, not angrily. Then God will be present there too. Another thought follows. What if I am not strong enough? The answer comes, I do not need tomorrow's strength tonight. Another question rises. What if everything changes? The response is quiet. God will not change. This is not denial. The person is not claiming that every outcome will be easy. They are choosing not to live through every possible outcome before it arrives. They are placing the unknown future beneath the known character of God. Slowly, the darkness loses its sharpness. The body begins to soften against the bed. The person falls asleep not because every fear has been defeated, but because fear is no longer standing alone at the center of the room. The morning comes gradually. The window becomes grey, then pale gold. Birds begin moving through the trees. The same world that felt threatening at midnight now appears ordinary again. Yet the lesson of the night remains. The person understands that peace did not come because the facts changed. It came because the heart returned to shelter. Psalm 91 never says that believers must pretend the darkness is light. It says they do not need to fear as those who have no refuge. The difference is not always visible from outside. Two people may face the same night. One may believe the darkness is empty and must be survived alone. The other may still tremble, yet whisper, "Even here, God sees me." But a greater question is now approaching oversea. Psalm 91 contains promises so powerful that they can easily be misunderstood. It speaks about deliverance, protection, and angels guarding the faithful. Many people read these words and conclude that those who trust God should never experience serious harm. But life and Scripture both show faithful people walking through suffering. So what does God's protection really mean? Does Psalm 91 promise that sickness will never enter, accidents will never happen, and grief will never come near those who believe? Or is its promise deeper than a life untouched by pain? The answer matters, because a promise that only works when life is easy cannot carry anyone through a real storm. And in the next part, we must face the difficult truth directly. God's protection does not always look like escape. Sometimes it looks like strength inside the fire, peace inside uncertainty, wisdom at the edge of danger, and a presence that refuses to leave when everything else has changed. The night may still come, the arrow may still fly, but neither darkness nor daylight can place you beyond the reach of the God who calls himself your refuge. There is a question that eventually rises in every honest reading of Psalm 91. It is the question people often hesitate to ask aloud because they fear it may sound faithless. If God promises protection, why do people who love him still suffer? Why do faithful families receive painful news? Why do devoted believers still walk through sickness, loss, danger, disappointment, and grief? Why do some prayers end with celebration while others seem to end in silence? These questions are not enemies of faith. They are often the place where shallow belief must either collapse or become deeper. A promise that only works when life is comfortable cannot carry a human heart through a real storm. If Psalm 91 is merely saying that those who trust God will never experience pain, then the lives of countless faithful people would seem to contradict it. But perhaps the psalm is not offering a life without suffering. Perhaps it is revealing a form of safety that suffering itself cannot destroy. The person from the quiet house sits near the window in the early morning. The sky is pale, and the first light has begun to soften the edges of the room. The medical uncertainty remains. Nothing has been fully resolved. They have prayed Psalm 91 for several nights, and its words have brought moments of peace. Yet a difficult thought continues to return. What if the answer is not the one I want? It is one thing to trust God while hoping he will remove the danger. It is another thing to ask whether he will still be faithful if the danger remains. The person feels almost guilty for thinking this way. They want to believe strongly. They want to speak with confidence. But deep inside, they know that true faith cannot be built on pretending the question does not exist. They open the Bible again and read the promises of rescue, deliverance, protection, and angelic care. The words are beautiful, but they are also difficult. They remember faithful people they have known who still suffered. A gentle man who prayed for healing but died after a long illness. A family who trusted God and still lost their home. A woman whose prayers for a child continued for years without the answer she expected. A missionary who served faithfully but faced danger. A believer whose life was marked by devotion, yet also by grief. Were these people outside God's shelter? Did they fail to pray correctly? Did they not trust enough? The heart knows such explanations are too simple and often too cruel. The Bible itself refuses to offer those explanations. It does not hide the suffering of faithful people. Joseph was loved by God, yet betrayed and imprisoned. David knew God as a refuge, yet spent long seasons fleeing danger. Elijah witnessed great miracles, yet later sat exhausted and discouraged beneath a tree. Job was described as faithful, yet his life entered a season of deep sorrow. The prophets spoke for God and were often rejected. The apostles carried the message of Christ and still faced hardship, imprisonment, loss, and persecution. Paul prayed for relief from a burden, yet the answer was not immediate removal. Even Jesus, the beloved Son, was not protected from every wound. rejection, or sorrow. This does not weaken the promises of Scripture. It changes the way we must understand them. God's protection cannot mean that faithful people become untouchable by every form of earthly pain. It must mean something deeper. It means that suffering never has complete authority over a life that belongs to God. Pain may enter, but it cannot erase divine presence. Loss may change the shape of a person's life, but it cannot remove them from God's care. The body may become weak, but the soul is not abandoned. Circumstances may collapse, but God remains able to preserve faith, love, courage, and hope within the ruins. There is a difference between being protected from something and being protected through it. Sometimes God protects from danger. A plan is interrupted. A warning arrives at the right moment. A harmful opportunity disappears. A person avoids an accident by minutes. A doctor notices something early. A relationship ends before deeper damage occurs. A door that seemed promising remains closed. These forms of protection are often recognized only later. At the time, they may look like inconvenience, disappointment, or delay. But looking back, a person realizes that God was guiding them away from something they could not yet see. At other times, protection takes the form of being carried through what could not be avoided. A person receives the diagnosis. The job ends. The relationship breaks. The loved one is gone. The future becomes different from the one they planned. In those moments, God's protection may not look like prevention. It may look like strength appearing one day at a time. It may look like bitterness being kept from taking root. It may look like the courage to ask for help. It may look like peace that does not match the circumstances. It may look like people arriving at the exact moment the burden becomes too heavy. It may look like the ability to continue loving after the heart has been wounded. This kind of protection is harder to understand because it does not always satisfy the desire for immediate rescue. Human beings naturally want suffering to be removed. There is nothing wrong with praying for that. Jesus himself asked that suffering might pass if another way were possible. Yet he also surrendered to the Father. This shows that trust is not the refusal to ask for relief. Trust is the willingness to remain connected to God, even when the answer is different from what the heart hoped. The person by the window thinks about this. They realize that most of their prayers have sounded like instructions. God, let this result be good. Let this problem disappear. Let this person change. Let this door open. Do not allow anything painful to happen. These requests came from love and fear, but beneath them was another belief. If the outcome is difficult, then I will not be safe. Psalm 91 begins to challenge that belief. It says that safety does not rest entirely in the outcome. It rests in belonging to God. This does not make painful outcomes less painful. Faith does not require someone to call suffering good when it is not good. Grief remains grief. Illness remains illness. Betrayal remains betrayal. Christianity does not ask people to smile at wounds and pretend they do not hurt. Jesus wept. He felt sorrow. He experienced anguish. He did not treat human pain as an illusion. The promise is not that pain will lose all emotional weight. The promise is that pain will never become the final truth. God's protection is connected to his larger purpose. But that does not mean every event can be easily explained. People sometimes try to comfort others by giving quick reasons for suffering. They say that everything happened to teach a lesson, produce growth, or prepare a testimony. While God can bring growth and meaning from pain, it is dangerous to speak as though we know exactly why every tragedy occurred. Some suffering remains mysterious. Compassion often requires silence before explanation. The person in pain does not always need a theory. They need someone to sit beside them and remind them that God has not left. There are times when protection looks like God preventing the heart from being destroyed by unanswered questions. He does not always provide a full explanation, but he gives enough grace to keep walking. The person learns to live without forcing every mystery into a simple answer. They begin to say, "I do not understand this, but I will not conclude that God has forgotten me." This is not intellectual surrender in the careless sense, it is relational trust. It is the choice to place the unanswered question inside a larger knowledge of God's character. The person from the quiet house remembers a moment from years earlier. A door had closed that they desperately wanted opened. At the time, they prayed, waited, and believed the opportunity was surely part of God's plan. When it disappeared, they felt confused and rejected. Months later, they learned that the situation behind the door had been unstable and harmful. What felt like abandonment had been protection. This memory brings comfort, but it also raises another truth. Not every painful event will become understandable in this life. Some stories do not offer such clear explanations. Faith cannot depend only on eventually discovering a hidden earthly reason. God's deepest protection is not a promise that every loss will later make sense. It is the promise that no loss can separate his people from him. This is why the Christian hope reaches beyond circumstances and even beyond death. Earthly safety is temporary for everyone. Bodies age, seasons change, human structures fail. Even the most careful person cannot remove every risk from life. If Psalm 91 only promised temporary physical security, its comfort would eventually end. But its vision reaches further. The life hidden in God is secure in a way that no earthly event can completely undo. This is not meant to make people careless. Trusting God does not mean ignoring safety, wisdom, medical advice, or responsibility. The protection of Psalm 91 is not permission to take unnecessary risks and expect God to prevent every consequence. In the Gospel accounts, the enemy once used words from this psalm while tempting Jesus. He suggested that Jesus could place himself in danger and expect angels to rescue him. But Jesus refused. He would not turn trust into a test of God. This moment is essential for understanding Psalm 91. Even a true promise can be misused when it is separated from humility and wisdom. Faith does not say, "Because God protects me, I can act without care." Faith says, "Because I belong to God, I will walk wisely and trust Him with what remains beyond my control." A person can wear a seatbelt, lock a door, follow medical treatment, leave a dangerous environment, seek counseling, and still trust deeply in God. Practical wisdom is not the enemy of spiritual confidence. It is often one of the forms that protection takes. Some people have been taught that seeking ordinary help shows a lack of faith. They feel guilty for needing a doctor, therapist, medication, financial advice, or support from others. They believe prayer should make every other form of assistance unnecessary. But God has always worked through means as well as miracles. He provides food through fields, healing through skill, encouragement through friends, guidance through wise counsel, and shelter through communities. Receiving help does not reduce His glory. It may reveal it. The person by the window remembers the friend who offered to attend the next appointment. Their first instinct was to decline. They did not want to seem weak or create worry. But perhaps accepting the offer is not burdening another person. Perhaps it is stepping beneath one of the wings God has extended through human kindness. Protection sometimes arrives disguised as a simple question. "Would you like me to come with you?" The person sends a message and says, "Yes." This small decision changes the atmosphere of the day. The uncertainty is still present, but it is no longer carried in complete isolation. God's protection has become visible through companionship. The friend cannot control the result, They cannot promise that everything will be easy, but they can sit nearby, listen carefully, remember details, and remain after the conversation is over. Presence becomes a form of shelter. There is another way God protects people. He protects them from becoming the worst version of themselves under pressure. Suffering can expose what has been hidden. Fear can produce anger. Disappointment can harden the heart. Pain can tempt someone to withdraw, accuse, manipulate, or lose compassion. None of this means the suffering person is evil. It means wounds create vulnerability. In such moments, protection may look like restraint. A person feels anger rising but pauses before speaking. They feel the desire to retaliate but choose silence. They feel bitterness growing but ask God for help before it becomes permanent. This kind of protection is easy to overlook because nothing dramatic happens. There is no visible rescue. Yet a relationship may be saved because one sentence was not spoken. A child may be spared from carrying an adult's fear. A marriage may survive because pride softened. A person may avoid years of regret because God gave enough strength to walk away from revenge. The protection of the soul is as real as the protection of the body. Imagine a man who has been deeply wronged by someone he trusted. The betrayal affects his work, reputation, and family. He prays for justice, but anger follows him into every room. At night, he imagines the moment when the other person will finally suffer. During the day, he speaks about forgiveness, but inside he is building a private prison. Psalm 91 may not protect him by reversing every consequence immediately. It may protect him by refusing to let hatred become his new identity. Forgiveness in such a situation does not mean pretending the wrong was small. It does not mean avoiding accountability or restoring trust without wisdom. It does not mean placing oneself back in danger. Forgiveness means releasing the right to become consumed by revenge. It means allowing God to judge what the wounded heart cannot carry without being damaged further. This can take time. It may need to be chosen repeatedly. But every movement away from bitterness is a form of rescue. The man may still experience loss. He may need to rebuild slowly. Yet, if God preserves his ability to love, pray, and live without hatred, then something precious has been protected. The person who caused harm did not gain control over the rest of his life. The wound did not become a throne. This is why God's protection must be understood in relation to freedom. Fear, shame, bitterness, and despair all try to possess the inner life. They say, because this happened, you will never be whole again. Because this person left, you will always be unwanted. Because you failed, you will always be a failure. Because you suffered, God must have abandoned you. Protection means these voices are not allowed to write the final story. The person from the quiet house begins to see that the psalm is not promising a life sealed away from reality. It is promising a life kept within the presence of God. The shelter is not a glass wall separating believers from the world. It is a relationship strong enough to hold them inside the world. There are moments when this protection feels powerful. A person senses courage, clarity, or peace. There are other moments when it feels almost invisible. They simply get out of bed. They answer one message. They eat one meal. They pray one sentence. They refuse one destructive thought. They make one wise appointment. They accept one offer of help. These actions may not feel spiritual, but they can be evidence that grace is quietly preserving the person. People often imagine miracles as sudden and unmistakable. Some miracles are, but there are also miracles of endurance. A mother continues loving through years of uncertainty. A grieving person slowly learns to smile without feeling guilty. A family chooses tenderness instead of blame. A person once controlled by shame begins to speak honestly. Someone who thought they would never trust again allows a safe friendship to grow. These transformations may not attract crowds, but they reveal the quiet power of God. Psalm 91 also speaks of angels guarding God's people. This image has brought comfort to many, but it should not be turned into fantasy or superstition. Scripture presents angels as servants of God, not as magical beings under human command. Their role points back to God's care. The promise is not that believers can demand supernatural signs. It is that divine protection includes realities human eyes may not perceive. There may be moments when danger passes without explanation. A delay prevents harm. A stranger offers timely assistance. A person feels compelled to change direction. A child is found before the situation worsens. People may wonder whether unseen protection was involved. It is reasonable to give thanks without claiming certainty about every detail. Faith can remain humble. It can say, "I do not know everything that happened, but I am grateful." At the same time, those who experience loss should never be told that they lacked angelic protection or sufficient faith. This turns comfort into accusation. The mystery of why some are spared in one way while others walk through suffering cannot be reduced to the quality of their prayers. God's love is not measured by whether every earthly danger was avoided. The deepest proof of God's care is not found in comparing outcomes. One family receives a miracle, another receives strength through grief. One patient recovers, another enters the final season of life with peace. One door opens, another remains closed. The stories are different, but divine presence is not limited to the story with the happiest visible result. This can be difficult to accept because people naturally celebrate rescue from pain more easily than grace within pain. Testimonies often focus on the moment the diagnosis changed, the money arrived, the relationship returned, or the danger disappeared. These are beautiful stories and should be told, but there are also testimonies that sound quieter. God stayed with me when the answer did not change. He kept my heart from collapsing. He gave me people who carried me. He taught me that sorrow and faith could exist in the same room. These stories are not failures of faith. They may reveal its deepest form. The person in the quiet house remembers an older believer they once knew. This person had endured several losses but never spoke as though suffering was simple. They did not say, "Everything happens for a reason," whenever someone cried. They sat close, listened, and sometimes said only, "God will be with you here." Their peace did not come from having avoided pain, it came from having found God inside it. When asked how they remained hopeful, the older believer once replied, "I stopped asking God to prove His love by making every road easy. I learned to recognize His love by noticing that He never left me on the hard ones." The memory stays with the person. Perhaps this is the heart of Psalm 91. God's protection is not always a promise that the road will be easy. It is a promise that the road will never become a place where His presence cannot reach. There is no hospital room beyond His care, no courtroom beyond His awareness, no grief too deep for His compassion, no mistake too old for His mercy, no future so uncertain that He is absent from it. Still, this truth must not become a way of minimizing danger. When someone is in a harmful situation, telling them simply to trust God and remain can become dangerous. God's shelter may include leaving, speaking, reporting, seeking safety, and asking others to intervene. Faith is not passive acceptance of abuse or harm. The God of refuge cares about truth, justice, and the protection of the vulnerable. Sometimes the most spiritual action is also the most practical one. Call for help. Tell a trusted adult. Speak to a professional. Leave the dangerous place. Do not confuse endurance with obedience when wisdom is clearly calling for action. God's protection can work through courage that refuses to stay silent. The person from the quiet house considers their own life. There are areas where they have mistaken worry for responsibility and silence for strength. They have carried burdens alone because asking for help felt uncomfortable. They begin to understand that trusting God may require more than prayer in private. It may require allowing others into the story. This realization brings another kind of fear. What if people misunderstand? What if they become disappointed? What if vulnerability changes the way others see them? Yet the secret place of God does not isolate people from healthy community. It often gives them courage to enter it. A heart secure in God no longer needs to appear invulnerable to everyone else. Later that day, the person meets the friend who offered support. They sit in a quiet cafe near a window. For several minutes, they speak about ordinary things. Then the person tells the truth about the fear they have been carrying. Their voice becomes unsteady. They admit that some nights have been difficult. They admit that prayer has brought peace, but not certainty. They admit that they are afraid of what may come. The friend does not interrupt with advice. They listen. When the person finishes, the friend says, "You do not have to be strong every minute." The sentence feels like a door opening. For weeks, the person has believed that strength means never allowing others to see the weight. But perhaps God's protection includes being known. Perhaps the burden becomes safer when it is shared with someone who will not use it carelessly. They pray together, not for a specific guaranteed outcome, but for wisdom, peace, good care, honest answers, and courage for each step. The prayer does not feel dramatic, yet when the person leaves, the road ahead seems less lonely. This is what mature trust often looks like. It does not demand certainty before moving. It gathers what God has provided: prayer, wisdom, people, truth, medical care, rest, and the next faithful step. It leaves the final outcome in hands larger than its own. The person returns home and reads Psalm 91 again. This time, the promises do not feel like a contract guaranteeing a painless life. They feel like declarations of belonging. You are mine. I see you. I hear you. I am with you. Trouble will not have the final word. The distinction changes the way they pray. Instead of saying only, "Do not let anything difficult happen," they begin to pray, "Keep me close to you in whatever happens. Protect my heart from despair. Protect my mind from lies. Give me wisdom. Surround me with people who speak truth. Close doors that would harm me. Open the help I need. Give me courage to act when action is required and patience to wait when waiting is faithful." This prayer is not weaker than the prayer for rescue. It is wider. It leaves room for God to protect in ways the person may not yet understand. The sun begins to set. Light moves slowly across the wall and disappears. Evening returns, but the room does not feel as threatening as before. The future is still unknown, yet the person has stopped measuring God's faithfulness only by the outcome they desire. They understand now that there are many forms of deliverance. Sometimes God removes the danger. Sometimes He gives a path around it. Sometimes He sends help through another person. Sometimes He provides wisdom before a mistake. Sometimes He restores what was lost. Sometimes He transforms the person through what could not be restored. Sometimes He gives peace before the answer. Sometimes He carries someone through an ending and leads them toward a beginning they could not yet imagine. In every form, the center remains the same. God does not abandon those who seek refuge in Him. Near the end of Psalm 91, the voice of the poem changes. Until this point, the psalmist has spoken about God. He has described shelter, shadow, wings, faithfulness, danger, and rescue. But then God Himself begins to speak. The language becomes direct, personal, intimate. God speaks of the one who loves Him, the one who knows His name, the one who calls upon Him. He does not promise a life in which trouble never appears. Instead, He says something even more powerful. He says, I will be with him in trouble. Not watching from a distance, not arriving only after the pain has passed. With him, in trouble. The promise does not deny the fire, it reveals who stands inside it. And in the next part, the person from the quiet house will discover that the greatest security in Psalm 91 may not be found in the words, I will rescue. It may be found in the words, I will be with you, because rescue can change a circumstance, but presence can change the person who must walk through it. Near the end of Psalm 91, something remarkable happens. The voice changes. Until this moment, the psalmist has been speaking about God, describing him as shelter, shadow, refuge, fortress, covering and shield. The language has carried the frightened heart through images of danger and protection, night and day, wilderness and wings. But now the distance disappears. God himself begins to speak. The promises are no longer described from the outside. They become personal words addressed to the one who clings to him. The rhythm changes from he will to I will. I will rescue. I will protect. I will answer. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver. I will honor. It is as though the one who has been hidden behind every image steps forward and says, You have heard what others say about me. Now listen to what I say to you. The person from the quiet house sits alone after receiving the latest medical update. The news is not as terrible as fear had imagined, but neither is it simple. More treatment will be needed. More appointments will follow. The road ahead is no longer completely unknown, yet knowing more has not made it feel easier. There will be decisions, waiting, fatigue, and days when courage may feel thin. The person had secretly hoped that Psalm 91 would lead to a sudden ending, a final phone call. A clear result, a problem removed before it could grow. Instead, the story has become a journey. The storm has not vanished. It has become real enough to have dates, names, and instructions. The house is quiet when the person opens the Bible again. Their eyes move toward the final verses. They have read them before, but this time one sentence seems to rise from the page, I will be with him in trouble. The words do not say, I will keep him from ever entering trouble. They do not say, if he trusts me correctly, trouble will remain outside the door. God speaks of trouble as a place his people may enter. Then he makes a promise about his own location. He will be there. This may be the most honest promise in the psalm. It does not deny the hospital corridor, the difficult conversation, the empty room, the delayed answer, or the season when life changes without permission. It does not offer comfort by pretending that faithful people live above pain. It offers something stronger. There is no place of trouble where God refuses to go. People often imagine God's presence as something easier to recognize in beautiful places. They think of sunlight through church windows, songs sung by a congregation, quiet mornings, peaceful landscapes, and moments when gratitude comes naturally. God is certainly present there, but Psalm 91 reveals that he is also present in places where no one wants to be. He is present beneath fluorescent hospital lights. He is present in the car after a painful conversation. He is present beside the unopened letter. He is present in the room where a family tries to understand new circumstances. He is present when someone lowers their head but has no words left to pray. I will be with him in trouble means that trouble does not become a spiritually empty space. It may feel empty. God's presence may not be accompanied by warmth, emotion, or immediate clarity. A person may pray and hear only silence. They may read scripture and struggle to concentrate. They may watch other people continue with ordinary life while their own world feels suspended. Yet the absence of a feeling is not the absence of God. The person in the quiet house remembers an afternoon from childhood. A strong storm had moved through the neighborhood and the electricity went out. The rooms became dark even though it was still early. Wind pressed against the windows and thunder shook the walls. The child had been afraid, but a parent sat beside them on the floor and held a flashlight beneath a blanket. Together, they created a small tent of light. The storm continued outside. Nothing about the weather changed. Yet the child's experience of it changed because someone trusted was near. Years later, the memory returns with unexpected power. The person realizes that they do not remember how long the storm lasted. They do not remember whether any branches fell or how quickly the electricity returned. What they remember is the presence beside them. They remember not being alone. Perhaps this is why God's promise is so personal. He does not only promise information, explanation, or a schedule. He promises Himself. Human beings often want a map, but God offers companionship. They want to know exactly how long the trouble will last, but He says He will remain. They want to know why the road was allowed, but He says He will walk it with them. These answers can feel insufficient when the heart is desperate for control. Yet there are moments when presence becomes more valuable than explanation, because explanation cannot hold a person when they are falling. A doctor can explain the treatment, but cannot promise every outcome. A friend can offer advice, but cannot remove every fear. A pastor can speak truth, but cannot live the difficult day in someone else's body. Human help matters deeply, but every human companion eventually reaches a limit. God's presence reaches beyond that limit. He remains in the hours when visitors have gone home, when the phone is quiet, when the room becomes dark, and when private thoughts return. This does not mean the person always feels comforted. There may be nights when God seems close and nights when He seems distant. Some prayers may bring immediate peace, while others feel heavy and unfinished. Faith is not measured by the intensity of spiritual emotion. It is measured, in part, by the willingness to keep turning toward God even when emotion does not cooperate. The person places one hand on the open page and speaks slowly. You said you would be with me here. It is not an accusation, but neither is it a polished prayer. It is a plea built from God's own promise. I do not know how to do this. I do not know what the next months will feel like. I do not know how strong I will be. But you said you would be with me. There is courage in praying this way. The person is no longer trying to convince God to enter the story. They are asking for eyes to recognize that He already has. The prayer changes from "come closer" to "help me notice your closeness." Sometimes this is the movement faith must make. God may not be absent. The heart may simply be overwhelmed by everything else. Trouble has a way of narrowing attention. A person sees the medical report, but not the friend who drove them home. They notice the unanswered question, but not the strength that appeared during the appointment. They see the long road ahead, but not the grace given for today. This is understandable. Pain naturally draws attention toward itself, but spiritual reflection slowly widens the view. It does not remove the trouble from the picture. It reveals that trouble is not the only thing present. The person begins to notice small signs of companionship. A message arrives from someone who did not know what to say but wrote anyway. A neighbor leaves food at the door. A nurse remembers a detail from the previous visit. A family member sits quietly without trying to force optimism. A song comes to mind at a difficult moment. Sleep arrives after a long night of wakefulness. None of these things solves the entire situation, yet together they say, "You are being accompanied." God's presence often comes through people, but people are not always perfect carriers of it. Some say the wrong thing, others disappear because they feel uncomfortable around pain. Some offer explanations when silence would have been kinder. Some promise to help but forget. These disappointments can deepen loneliness. The person in trouble may feel that even the community of faith does not understand. Yet God's promise is not dependent on the flawless behavior of others. He can work through imperfect people, and He can remain present when they fail. He may lead the wounded person towards safer companions. He may teach them to speak clearly about what they need. He may give them permission to stop receiving advice from those who consistently increase the burden. Divine presence does not require accepting every human response as wise. The words, "I will be with him in trouble," also reveal something about God's character. He does not love from a safe distance. He enters the places of human suffering. The Christian story reaches its clearest expression in Jesus, who did not remain removed from hunger, exhaustion, rejection, grief, injustice, or death. He wept beside those who mourned. He touched those others avoided. He noticed the unseen. He entered human pain not as a spectator, but as one who carried it. This matters because many people assume suffering means God has moved away. They interpret difficulty as evidence that they have been forgotten or punished. But the life of Jesus makes that conclusion impossible. The presence of trouble is not automatic proof of divine absence. Sometimes the place of greatest suffering is also the place where God's nearness becomes most profound. That nearness may not look dramatic. A person may not hear a voice or see a sign. It may appear as the ability to take one more step. It may be the strength to remain gentle when fear could have produced anger. It may be the courage to ask a difficult question. It may be the willingness to receive help. It may be a moment of peace that lasts only long enough to breathe. These small graces are easy to dismiss because they do not remove the larger problem. But perhaps they are how the presence of God carries a person through it. The person from the quiet house attends the next appointment with a friend. The hallway feels familiar now. The white walls, the quiet voices, the chairs arranged near the windows. The friend carries a notebook. The person carries Psalm 91 in memory. Before entering the room, they repeat one sentence: "You will be with me in trouble." The conversation is long. Some words are reassuring, others are difficult. A plan is explained, dates are chosen, questions are answered, and new questions appear. At one point, the person feels overwhelmed and stops understanding what is being said. The friend notices and asks the doctor to slow down. The person feels embarrassed for a moment, then grateful. Protection has come through someone else paying attention. Afterward, they sit in the car without speaking. The parking lot is busy, but inside the vehicle, the world feels still. The person expected to feel stronger once there was a plan. Instead, they feel tired. Tears come quietly. The friend does not try to stop them. After several minutes, the person says, "I thought trusting God would make me less afraid." The friend answers, "Maybe trust is not the reason you are not afraid. Maybe it is the reason you do not have to be afraid alone." The sentence remains in the silence. Many people believe faith should remove the emotional cost of trouble. They think courage means remaining calm, speaking confidently, and never breaking down. But tears are not proof that trust has failed. Sometimes tears are what trust looks like when the heart finally stops pretending. The person who cries in God's presence is not necessarily farther from Him than the person who speaks with certainty. They may be more honest. There is a kind of strength that performs, and there is a kind of strength that receives. Performing strength says, "I must show everyone that I can handle this." Receiving strength says, "I cannot carry this alone, so I will allow God and others to help me." Psalm 91 invites the second kind. Refuge is meaningful only when a person admits the need for it. The car remains parked. The friend prays quietly. The prayer does not demand that the process become easy. It asks for wisdom, good care, peace, endurance, protection from complications, and grace for the family. It asks God to remain visible in small ways. When the prayer ends, the person still feels tired, but not abandoned. This is one meaning of the word with. It does not always change the amount of weight, but it changes how the weight is carried. A table can support what a single hand cannot hold. A community can carry parts of a burden that would overwhelm one person. God's presence creates space for this shared carrying. He reminds people that independence is not the highest form of maturity. The promise also speaks to those whose trouble is not visible. Some suffering receives immediate compassion because it can be seen. A cast, a hospital stay, a funeral, or a public loss gives others a clear reason to gather. But many forms of trouble remain hidden. A person may live with anxiety no one notices. They may care for a difficult family member while appearing cheerful outside the home. They may experience loneliness in a crowded room. They may carry financial fear, unanswered grief, shame from the past, or exhaustion that has no simple explanation. To them, God says, "I am with you in trouble." Not only in trouble that other people understand, not only in suffering that receives public sympathy, He is present in the burden that is difficult to explain. He does not require pain to become visible before He considers it real. Imagine a young woman sitting on the floor of a small apartment after a long workday. Her shoes are still near the door. A meal sits untouched on the counter. She has spent the day answering questions, smiling at co-workers, and completing tasks. No one knows that she feels close to breaking. For months, she has carried a private struggle. She prays, but the struggle has not disappeared. She feels ashamed because other people seem to move through life with ease. She opens Psalm 91 on her phone. The light from the screen fills the dim room. When she reaches the words, "I will be with him in trouble," she begins to cry. Not because the problem is solved, but because the verse gives a name to her experience: trouble. She has been trying to call it weakness, failure, lack of discipline, and insufficient faith. God calls it trouble and promises presence within it. Sometimes healing begins when pain is named without shame. The young woman sends a message to someone trustworthy. "I have not been doing well. Could we talk?" The message is difficult to send. Her hand hesitates before pressing the screen, but when she does, a closed room opens. The reply comes, "Yes, you do not have to handle this alone." This is not the end of the struggle. It is the beginning of shared light. God's presence may lead to prayer, friendship, wise counsel, or professional care. The promise, "I will be with you," is not a reason to remain isolated. It is often the reason to step toward help. God's presence in trouble also means that identity can survive what circumstances change. A person may lose a role that once defined them. A worker may lose a career. A parent may watch children grow and leave. A marriage may end. A body may no longer perform as it once did. A public reputation may change. These losses can create a frightening question: who am I now? The world often answers identity through usefulness, success, health, beauty, productivity, or approval. When one of these disappears, the person may feel as though they are disappearing too. But God's presence says that identity is held deeper than circumstance. Before a person is successful or unsuccessful, strong or weak, recognized or overlooked, they are seen by God. They are not reduced to the worst thing that happened or the role they can no longer perform. The person from the quiet house struggles with this as treatment begins. They have always been dependable. They are accustomed to helping others, keeping schedules, and remaining productive. Now there are days when energy disappears quickly. Simple tasks take longer. Plans must be changed. Accepting help feels uncomfortable. The person fears becoming a burden. One afternoon, they apologize to a family member for needing assistance. The family member answers, "You have loved us for years. Let us love you now." The words reveal another form of protection. God protects the person from believing that worth is equal to usefulness. Being cared for does not make them less valuable. Weakness does not remove dignity. The season may require receiving rather than giving, but love remains. This is difficult for many people because receiving exposes need. Giving allows a person to feel strong. Receiving requires trust. Yet beneath God's wings, people learn that dependence is not always failure. Human beings were never designed to live without one another. Even the body itself is made of parts that need each other. "I will be with him in trouble" also means God remains when the trouble lasts longer than expected. Some crises are brief. A frightening moment comes and passes. Other troubles become seasons. Weeks become months. The initial support from others may become quieter. People return to their own responsibilities. The person suffering is left with a new normal. Long trouble creates a different spiritual challenge. At first, adrenaline can provide energy. Later, exhaustion replaces it. The person no longer needs courage only for one dramatic moment. They need faithfulness for ordinary days. They need strength to repeat the same routines, attend the next appointment, complete the next form, or wake again to circumstances that have not changed. God's presence in long trouble is often discovered through daily bread rather than dramatic rescue. Enough strength for today. Enough patience for one conversation. Enough peace for one night. Enough hope to make the next plan. People may wish for a large reserve of grace stored safely for the future, but God often gives it in daily portions. This keeps the heart returning. The Israelites in the wilderness could not gather unlimited manna for distant days. They learned to receive what was needed for the present. In the same way, someone walking through prolonged uncertainty may not receive emotional strength for the entire journey at once. They receive what is needed now. The person begins keeping a small notebook. At the end of each day, they write one sentence about where grace appeared. "A friend drove me. I slept well. The nurse was kind. I was afraid, but I made the call. The family laughed at dinner. I felt peace for 10 minutes. The result was better than expected. The result was difficult, but I was not alone." The notebook does not deny pain. Some pages contain tears, but over time, it becomes evidence that trouble has not erased every form of goodness. The person sees that God's presence has not always been loud, yet it has been consistent. There will be days when no sentence comes easily. On those days, the person writes only, "I am still here." Even this can become a testimony. Survival itself may be evidence of grace. God says He will answer when the person calls. This promise can be confusing because answers do not always look the way people expect. Sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes no, sometimes wait. Sometimes the answer is guidance rather than change. Sometimes it is a person, a closed door, a growing conviction, or strength that appears after the prayer. An answer is not always an explanation. God may respond without revealing every reason. He may provide the next step without showing the entire road. Human beings often want answers that remove the need for trust, but God may give answers that deepen relationship. The person asks God repeatedly, "How will this end?" No clear answer comes. But another answer begins to emerge. "You will not face the ending alone." This is not the information the person wanted, yet it is the promise they need. There is mercy in not knowing everything at once. Full knowledge of the road might overwhelm the heart. God sometimes protects by revealing only what can be carried today. The next appointment, the next decision, the next conversation, the next prayer. This limited light is not punishment, it can be kindness. Imagine walking along a dark path with a lantern. The light does not reveal the entire mountain. It reveals the ground near your feet. If you insist on seeing every turn before taking the first step, you will never move. Trust walks within the light that has been given. The person from the quiet house begins to understand that faith is not a promise to feel strong every day. It is a decision to keep turning toward God on strong days and weak ones. On some mornings, they pray with confidence. On others, they simply whisper, "Stay with me." The prayer is unnecessary in one sense because God has already promised to stay. Yet saying it helps the heart receive what is true. Near the end of the psalm, God also says he will honor the one who clings to him. This does not necessarily mean public success, recognition, or an easy life. Divine honor may look different from human applause. It may be the dignity God gives to a life that remains faithful in hidden places. The world may never see the courage it took to forgive, to continue, to ask for help, or to choose hope after disappointment. God sees. The parent who prays beside a child's bed is seen. The caregiver who becomes tired but continues with tenderness is seen. The lonely believer who returns to prayer despite feeling nothing is seen. The person who refuses revenge is seen. The patient who receives help with humility is seen. The worker who chooses honesty when fear tempts compromise is seen. None of these acts may appear impressive to the world, but they are known to God. His presence gives meaning to hidden faithfulness. No prayer is wasted because no honest turning toward God is unseen. A person may believe their life has become small during trouble. Their world may be reduced to one room, one routine, or one day at a time, but small does not mean insignificant. A quiet act of trust can hold eternal weight. The person from the quiet house reaches a difficult week. Treatment has brought fatigue. Sleep is inconsistent. Encouraging words feel harder to receive. One evening they open Psalm 91 but cannot concentrate. The lines blur. They close the Bible and feel disappointed. For months, the psalm has been a source of comfort. Now, even reading it feels like work. A family member enters the room and notices the closed book. The person admits, "I cannot pray tonight." The family member sits nearby and says, "Then I will pray." This becomes one of the most sacred moments of the journey. Faith does not disappear because someone else must carry the words. The community becomes the voice when the individual is tired. The person listens while another speaks their name before God. They do not contribute a sentence, they simply receive. God's promise to be present does not depend on human energy. He does not leave when someone is too tired to pray. He is not waiting for spiritual performance. Sometimes the most faithful response is allowing another person to hold hope for a while. The prayer ends. Nothing dramatic happens, but the person sleeps more deeply that night. Weeks pass. Some days are difficult, others unexpectedly gentle. The person begins to notice that they are changing, not becoming fearless, but becoming less controlled by fear. Not receiving every answer, but learning to live without all of them. Not enjoying trouble, but discovering that trouble cannot remove every reason for gratitude. They also become more sensitive to the pain of others. Before they sometimes offered quick encouragement because silence made them uncomfortable. Now they understand the value of simply staying. When a friend shares bad news, they do not rush to say everything will be fine. They say, "I am here." The presence they received becomes a presence they can offer. This is one way God transforms trouble without calling trouble good. He creates compassion in places where pain once lived alone. The person does not need to be grateful for every wound, but they can be grateful that the wound did not make love impossible. One morning, light enters the room earlier than before. The season is changing. The person stands near the window and remembers the first night when fear came to the door. At that time, they believed safety meant receiving a guarantee that nothing painful would happen. Now they understand safety differently. Safety is the ability to rest in a presence stronger than uncertainty. Safety is knowing that weakness does not cancel belonging. Safety is being held when the future cannot be controlled. Safety is discovering that God can meet a person in rooms they once feared entering. Safety is not a life beyond trouble. It is a life in which trouble cannot remove God. The words of Psalm 91 have become more than poetry. They have become memory. Shelter was found in the night. Wings were found in waiting. Faithfulness was found in ordinary help. Presence was found in trouble. The person still prays for healing and relief. Mature faith does not stop asking, but the prayer has changed. God, lead me out of this if it is your will. Protect me from what can be avoided. Give wisdom to those caring for me. But whatever this road contains, keep my heart near you. This prayer does not surrender hope. It deepens it. Hope is no longer attached to one narrow outcome. It is attached to God. The final part of Psalm 91 speaks of satisfaction and salvation. These words point toward a life that is not ultimately measured by fear. The psalm began with a person entering shelter. It ends with God revealing the security of belonging to Him. Yet one final question remains. How can someone live this way after the emotional moment passes? How does a person dwell beneath God's shadow on an ordinary Tuesday, in a busy home, during a stressful workday, or when fear returns without warning? How can Psalm 91 become more than words read during emergencies? The answer will not be found in a complicated spiritual formula. It begins with simple practices of returning, morning surrender, honest prayer, remembered faithfulness, wise action, rest, community, the willingness to release tomorrow and receive today. The person from the quiet house is about to learn that dwelling is not one great decision made once. It is 1,000 small decisions to come home to God. The final night of the story approaches. The problems have not all disappeared, but the person who enters that night is no longer the same person who first opened the Bible in fear. They have learned that God may calm the storm. They have learned that He may guide them around it. They have learned that He may carry them through it. But above all, they have learned this: when trouble enters the room, God does not wait outside the door. The final night of the story arrives quietly. There is no thunder at the window, no urgent phone call, and no dramatic sign in the sky. The house looks almost exactly as it did when fear first came to the door. The same hallway stretches through the darkness, the same clock continues its patient movement, the same Bible rests beside the bed. Many of the questions that once kept the person awake have not been answered completely. The road ahead still contains appointments, decisions, changing plans, and moments that will require courage. Yet something inside the room is different, because the person who enters this night is no longer the same person who first opened Psalm 91 in desperation. The circumstances have not been transformed into a perfect ending, but the heart has begun to learn where to rest. And perhaps this is how God changes a life most often, not by removing every uncertain road, but by teaching the soul how to walk those roads without losing its way home. The person stands near the bedroom window and watches the last light disappear behind the trees. The sky moves slowly from gold to blue, then from blue into darkness. In the past, the coming night often felt like a door opening toward fear. It meant silence, unguarded thoughts, and long hours in which the future seemed impossible to control. But tonight, darkness does not feel empty. It feels like a familiar place where God has already met them. The night has not become harmless, but it has become inhabited. The person remembers the words that have followed them through the journey: shelter, shadow, refuge, fortress, wings, faithfulness, presence. These words are no longer distant religious images. Each one is connected to a real moment. Shelter was found when fear filled the bedroom. Shadow was discovered in the waiting room. Wings appeared through the kindness of a friend. Faithfulness was seen in ordinary provision. Presence became real when trouble did not immediately leave Mahatma. This is how scripture often enters a life. At first, it is read as information. Later, it becomes memory. A promise that once seemed beautiful but general becomes attached to a particular hospital hallway, a kitchen table, a lonely evening, a difficult conversation, or a morning when getting out of bed required unexpected courage. The words remain the same, but the person reading them has changed. They now know that Psalm 91 is not a charm to be repeated against every danger. It is an invitation to live near God. It is not a guarantee that every night will be easy. It is a reminder that no night will be faced alone. It does not promise that every arrow will remain far away. It reveals that even when life is wounded, the deepest part of the soul can remain held by the faithfulness of God. The person turns on a small lamp and opens the Bible. They no longer read quickly, searching for one sentence that will immediately remove fear. They read slowly, allowing each image to settle. The one who dwells, the one who remains, the one who learns to make God a home rather than an emergency exit. This is the lesson that now matters most. Dwelling is not one emotional decision made during a crisis. It is a pattern of returning. It is 1,000 quiet choices made across ordinary days. It is turning toward God when prayer feels powerful and when it feels weak. It is remembering His character when life is calm. So the heart knows where to go when the storm begins. Many people want to know how to live beneath God's shadow in practical ways. They understand the idea of trust, but trust can feel difficult to practice when schedules are crowded, emotions are complicated, and fear returns without warning. They may imagine that dwelling requires long hours of silence, perfect concentration, or an extraordinary spiritual experience. But the life described in Psalm 91 can begin very simply. It may begin before the feet touch the floor in the morning, with one honest sentence. God, this day belongs to you. It may continue while preparing breakfast, driving to work, caring for a child, or walking into a difficult room. Dwelling is not always separation from ordinary life. It is learning to recognize God within it. The next morning, the person wakes before the alarm. For several seconds, the room is quiet and the mind has not yet gathered its usual concerns. In the past, this small space between sleep and worry would disappear quickly. The person would reach for the phone, check messages, remember the schedule, and allow the weight of the day to enter all at once. But now they remain still. They place one hand over the blanket and whisper, "Thank you for being here before I woke." It is a small prayer, hardly more than a breath. Yet it changes the beginning of the day. The first voice the heart hears is not fear, urgency, or obligation. It is the reminder of presence. The person does not ask for every problem to be solved before breakfast. They ask for enough grace to live faithfully through the next few hours. They pray for wisdom during the upcoming conversation, patience with family, clarity during the appointment, and the ability to notice kindness. They name the fear that still remains, but they do not allow it to become the center of the prayer. They place it beneath something larger. God, you are already in this day. Morning surrender does not mean the person will feel peaceful for the next 24 hours. An anxious thought may return before the coffee is ready. A difficult message may arrive. The body may feel tired. Dwelling does not create emotional perfection. It creates a direction of return. When the heart wanders into fear, it has somewhere to come back to. When frustration rises, the person can pause and remember, I do not have to respond from panic. When uncertainty grows, they can say, I have entered a future in my mind that God has not asked me to carry yet. The practice is not dramatic. No one else sees it. Yet the inner life is shaped through such hidden decisions. A person who repeatedly returns to God begins to recognize the difference between fear and wisdom. Fear speaks with urgency and finality. It says, everything is collapsing. You must control this immediately. If you make one mistake, nothing can be repaired. Wisdom is quieter. It says, pause, tell the truth, take the next responsible step, ask for help. Release what you cannot control. Dwelling beneath God's shadow does not make decisions for the person, but it creates enough inner space to make decisions without being ruled by panic. There are days when the person follows this practice easily. There are also days when it seems forgotten. The morning begins quickly, the schedule becomes crowded. By noon, tension has returned. A small problem becomes larger than it should. The person responds impatiently to someone they love. Later, guilt appears. In the past, one failure might have convinced them that the entire spiritual effort was false. They would think, I am not good at trusting God. I always return to fear. But dwelling teaches another lesson. Returning is not proof of failure. Returning is the practice itself. A home is not a place a person never leaves. It is the place they know how to come back to. In the same way, the heart may wander through worry, anger, control, distraction, or discouragement. The invitation remains, come back. God's shelter is not destroyed because the person had a difficult morning. His mercy does not close at noon. The person can stop, apologize where necessary, and pray again. I lost my peace. Bring me back. Grace makes return possible without denial. It does not pretend the impatient words did not matter. It leads the person to take responsibility. They speak to the family member they hurt and say, I was afraid, but that does not excuse the way I spoke. I am sorry. The apology becomes another form of shelter because truth prevents distance from growing. God's protection does not only guard people from external danger, it protects relationships by teaching humility. The person begins to understand that a life beneath God's shadow is not a life free from mistakes. It is a life where mistakes do not have to become permanent hiding places. Shame says, run from God until you become better. Grace says, come near so that healing can begin. Shame keeps the heart outside the shelter. Grace opens the door. Another practice grows during the weeks that follow, turning fear into prayer before it becomes a long internal conversation. Fear often arrives as a question. What if the result is bad? What if the money is not enough? What if this relationship changes? What if I cannot handle what comes next? The mind's instinct is to answer the question repeatedly, building different scenarios and searching for certainty. But the person begins to interrupt the process. When the question appears, they turn it toward God. What if I cannot handle what comes next? Then give me the grace I will need when it comes. What if someone I love faces danger? Watch over them where I cannot. What if the future changes? Remain my home when everything else feels unfamiliar. What if I become afraid again? Draw me back beneath your wings. The questions do not always disappear, but they stop being private rooms where fear speaks alone. They become prayers. This is one of the quiet transformations faith can create. The same thought that once separated the heart from peace becomes a doorway into the presence of God. The person also learns to remember. Fear often creates spiritual amnesia. It makes the current difficulty seem like the first moment God has ever been needed. Past faithfulness becomes difficult to see. The heart says, this time is different. This time I am truly alone. Remembering answers that lie. It does not guarantee that the present story will unfold exactly like the past. It reminds the person that God's character has not changed. The small notebook from the previous weeks becomes important. Its pages contain brief records of grace, a friend who came, a meal that arrived, a kind nurse, a night of sleep, a moment of courage, an unexpected answer, a difficult result that did not destroy hope. On hard days, the person reads these lines. Each one is small, but together they form a history of being carried. This is why remembrance appears so often throughout the Bible. People built memorials, repeated stories, celebrated deliverance, and taught future generations what God had done. The human heart forgets quickly, especially under pressure. Remembering is not living in the past. It is carrying evidence of faithfulness into the present. Perhaps someone listening has their own hidden memorials. A time when provision arrived in an unexpected way, a danger that passed, a friendship that began when loneliness felt permanent, a door that closed and later proved merciful, a season of grief that once seemed impossible to survive, yet somehow one day followed another until breathing became easier. These memories do not explain every future difficulty, but they whisper, "You have been carried before." The person writes a new sentence in the notebook. The problem did not disappear, but fear did not control the entire day. This is worth remembering. Spiritual growth is not always measured by dramatic victory. Sometimes it is seen in the smaller amount of time fear occupies. The person still feels anxiety, but they recognize it sooner. They still become discouraged, but they ask for help more quickly. They still have questions, but they no longer assume every question means God has left. Rest also becomes part of dwelling. For a long time, the person treated rest as something earned after every responsibility was completed. But responsibilities are rarely finished. There is always another message, task, concern, or problem. Without intention, rest is continually delayed. The body becomes tired, the mind loses perspective, and fear gains strength. Psalm 91 speaks of resting beneath God's shadow. Rest is not only physical sleep, though sleep matters. It is the release of the belief that everything depends on one person remaining alert. The person begins practicing a simple evening surrender. Before bed, they review the day with God. They give thanks for what was good. They admit where they failed. They name what remains unfinished. Then they say, "I am placing this day in your hands." Some nights the unfinished tasks are practical. A message has not been answered. A decision has not been made. On other nights, they are emotional. A conversation remains unresolved. Fear about the future has returned. The person imagines placing each burden outside the bedroom door, not because it no longer matters, but because the night is not the time to carry it. God, you will continue being God while I sleep. This sentence becomes a form of freedom. The world continues without the person's constant attention. The body rests. God remains awake. The next morning may bring work, but the night is allowed to be night. There is wisdom in this surrender. Human beings were not created to live as though they were responsible for holding the universe together. Worry often disguises itself as love. A parent believes staying awake proves care. A worker believes constant thought proves responsibility. A grieving person believes releasing a memory for one evening means forgetting. But love does not require endless internal suffering. Rest can be an act of trust. The person learns that peace sometimes needs to be protected through boundaries. They become more careful about what enters the mind before sleep. They no longer fill every quiet moment with troubling news, endless opinions, or stories designed to increase fear. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means recognizing that attention is limited and valuable. A heart cannot receive every alarm in the world and remain peaceful. Some voices are loud, but not wise. Some information is repeated, but not useful. Some conversations create anxiety without leading toward action. Dwelling beneath God's shadow may involve closing a screen, leaving an argument, or refusing to rehearse the same frightening possibility. Silence becomes not an empty space, but a place where the soul can breathe. Community remains essential. The person does not turn Psalm 91 into a private shelter where no one else is allowed. God's presence leads them toward trustworthy people. They continue meeting the friend who attended the appointment. They speak honestly with family. They accept prayer. They ask practical questions. They learn that being protected by God does not mean becoming independent of everyone. There are burdens God never intended one person to carry alone. Community cannot remove every pain, but it can prevent isolation from making the pain heavier. A meal can say, "You are remembered." A ride can say, "Your need is not inconvenient." A quiet conversation can say, "Your fear is safe here." These ordinary acts become visible shadows of divine care. The person also begins offering the same presence to others. One afternoon, a friend calls with difficult news. The old instinct is to find the correct answer, speak encouragement, and make the discomfort disappear. But the person remembers the moments when advice felt too fast. They listen instead. They allow silence. They say, "I am sorry you are carrying this. I am here." In that moment, the shelter of Psalm 91 expands. The person who once needed someone to remain now becomes someone who can remain. This does not mean they have completed the journey or become free from fear. It means grace has begun to move through them. God's protection is never meant to create a closed life concerned only with personal safety. It creates compassion. Those who know what it feels like to be covered become more willing to cover others with patience, prayer, and kindness. The person understands now that spiritual protection is connected to the way they treat people. A heart filled with fear often becomes defensive. It tries to control, accuse, or withdraw. A heart resting in God has more room for mercy. It does not need to win every argument or protect its image at every cost. Because identity is held by God, the person can listen, apologize, forgive wisely, and speak truth without cruelty. This does not mean allowing harmful behavior. God's peace is not passive surrender to abuse, manipulation, or danger. Sometimes dwelling beneath His shadow gives the courage to leave, set a boundary, or ask for help. Protection may look like a closed door. It may look like saying no. It may look like refusing to return to a situation where repeated harm is ignored. The person has learned that peace and wisdom belong together. A peaceful heart can still make a firm decision. Forgiveness does not require the restoration of unsafe trust. Compassion does not require abandoning discernment. God's shelter is not a place where truth is hidden. It is where truth can be faced without fear having complete control. As the weeks become months, life does not return to its previous form. Some things are restored, other things remain changed. There are good reports and difficult days. The person feels stronger at times and tired at others, but the old belief that safety requires complete control has begun to loosen. They no longer ask only, "How can I make sure nothing painful ever happens?" They ask, "How can I remain near God in whatever today contains?" This is a more honest question. It does not deny the desire for protection. It places protection inside relationship. There are still moments when the person wants certainty. Before a new appointment, fear rises with surprising strength. It feels as though no growth has occurred. The mind returns to old possibilities. But this time, the person recognizes the pattern. They do not become ashamed. They take the Bible, the notebook, and the hand of someone they trust. They pray, "I have been here before, and you were here too." This is mature faith. not never returning to fear, but remembering how to return from it. The appointment ends with encouraging news. The road will continue, but the situation is improving. The person receives the words with gratitude, tears come, the friend beside them smiles. For a few moments, relief fills the room. The person thanks God without pretending the journey is finished. They recognize the visible mercy of progress. Yet they also know that God was no less present before the good news came. His faithfulness did not begin with the result. The result revealed one form of care, but presence had been there from the first night. This protects the person from building faith only on favorable outcomes. Gratitude becomes deeper because it includes both rescue and endurance. Thank you for the answer. Thank you for the people who stayed. Thank you for the strength you gave before the answer. Thank you for being present when I was not sure how the story would end. Some viewers may receive the answer they have been praying for. Others may still be waiting. Some may be entering a season of healing. Others may be learning how to live with a change they never chose. Psalm 91 does not force all these lives into the same visible ending. It offers them the same refuge. To the person who has received good news, it says, "Do not forget the shelter when the storm becomes quiet." To the person still waiting, it says, "Silence is not abandonment." To the person grieving, it says, "Sorrow does not remove you from beneath his wings." To the person ashamed of the past, it says, "Mercy is greater than the room where you keep punishing yourself." To the person afraid for someone they love, it says, "God can be present where your hands cannot reach." To the exhausted caregiver, it says, "You are seen as surely as the person you are caring for." To the person who cannot feel God, it says, "His faithfulness does not rise and fall with your emotions." To the one who has only enough faith to whisper his name, it says, "A whisper can still be a movement toward home." The person from the quiet house begins to understand another truth. God's protection is not only about surviving danger, it is also about becoming free enough to live. Fear promises safety through shrinking. It says, "Do not risk loving. Do not begin again. Do not trust anyone. Do not hope too deeply, because disappointment may come." Under the rule of fear, a person can remain physically safe while the heart becomes small. God's shelter is different. It gives security that allows courage. Because the person is held, they can step into life again. They can make plans without pretending plans are permanent. They can love without demanding guarantees. They can hope without controlling the outcome. They can serve, create, travel, forgive, and begin again. Not because nothing can go wrong, but because wrong turns and painful seasons cannot place them outside God's care. True refuge does not become a prison. It becomes the place from which a person can walk forward. One morning, the person leaves the house early. The air is cool, the road is quiet, and the first light rests along the rooftops. Months earlier, the same road felt like a path toward uncertainty. Now it looks different, though nothing about the street has changed. The person walks slowly, noticing details that fear once covered: birds on a wire, water on the grass, light in a kitchen window, the sound of someone opening a shop. Fear narrows the world until only danger is visible. Peace widens it again. Beauty returns, not because pain has been denied, but because pain is no longer the only reality. The person reaches a small hill where the morning sky can be seen clearly. They stop. There is no audience, no music, and no dramatic declaration. They simply stand beneath the changing light and say, "You kept me." The sentence does not mean every circumstance unfolded exactly as desired. It means the heart was not abandoned. Faith was strained but not erased. Hope became quiet but remained alive. Help arrived, Rest returned, grace appeared day by day. You kept me. Perhaps these words contain the whole story of Psalm 91. God kept the person when the night was long. He kept them when fear entered through imagined futures. He kept them when trouble became real. He kept them through the hands of friends, the wisdom of doctors, the honesty of prayer, and the mercy of rest. He kept them when they felt strong. He kept them when someone else had to pray. He kept them not by removing every difficult road, but by refusing to leave them on any of those roads. The person returns home as the day begins. The house is filled with ordinary sounds. Water running, a door closing, a message arriving. Life continues, and with it come new responsibilities. Psalm 91 has not made life permanently quiet. It has given the heart a quiet center to which it can return. This is the secret place. Not a hidden location somewhere far from ordinary people. Not a spiritual achievement reserved for those who never doubt. Not a promise that every prayer will be answered in the exact way requested. The secret place is the nearness of God received again and again. It is the moment fear says, "You are alone," and the heart answers, "God is here." It is the moment shame says, "You cannot return," and grace opens the door. It is the moment exhaustion says, "You must carry everything," and the soul releases what belongs to God. It is the moment uncertainty says, "You cannot rest until you know," and faith whispers, "I know enough to trust the one who remains." The person sits once more beside the bedroom window. Evening is approaching. This time, the Bible is not opened in panic. It is opened in gratitude. They read the final promises of the psalm and notice how personal they are. God does not speak about an unknown crowd. He speaks about a person who loves him, calls to him, and knows his name. To know God's name is more than knowing a word. It is knowing something of his character: refuge, faithfulness, mercy, presence. The person has learned these names through experience. God is no longer only the one they heard about, he is the one they encountered in the night. The room grows darker, but the person does not hurry to turn on the lamp. They sit in the fading light and pray for those who are still in the first night of their own story. God be near to the person who cannot sleep because fear has made the future feel unbearable. Let them know they do not have to solve tomorrow tonight. Be near to the one waiting for medical news, the one grieving someone they love, the one worried about a child, and the one carrying a responsibility too heavy for one heart. Cover the person who feels exposed. Give wisdom where there is danger. Open a safe path for those who need to leave harmful situations. Send trustworthy people to those who are isolated. Give courage to speak, ask for help, and receive care. Be close to the person who is ashamed of the past. Teach them the difference between repentance and endless self-punishment. Help them make amends where possible, accept mercy where it is offered, and stop building a home inside their worst moment. Be with the caregiver whose strength is becoming thin. Remind them that resting is not abandoning the person they love. Provide practical help. Let someone notice what they have been carrying quietly. Be near to the one who prayed and did not receive the answer they expected. Protect their heart from believing that disappointment means they are forgotten. Give them room to grieve without shame and enough light for the next step. Be with the person who cannot feel your presence. Let your faithfulness hold them when their emotions cannot. When they do not have words, receive their silence. When they cannot pray, send someone to pray beside them. Protect homes, families, children, travelers, workers, patients, and those who must make difficult decisions. Give wisdom rather than panic, courage rather than denial, and peace that is strong enough to tell the truth. Where healing is possible, bring healing. Where danger can be prevented, provide protection. Where a door should close, close it. Where help is needed, make the path clear. Where someone must wait, give daily grace. Where something cannot be changed, remain close enough that despair does not become the final voice. The person pauses. The room is almost dark now. Then the prayer becomes simpler. God, teach us to dwell. Teach us to come to you before the storm, during the storm, and after it has passed. Teach us to recognize your shelter in ordinary moments. Teach us to receive help without shame. Teach us to rest without believing the world depends on our worry. Teach us to trust your heart when we cannot understand your ways. Teach us to live not as people who believe nothing painful can happen, but as people who know nothing can separate us from your care. There is no sudden sound from heaven. The room remains ordinary, yet ordinary rooms have become sacred places throughout this story. A bedside table, a waiting area, a parked car, a kitchen, and a quiet window have all become places where God was found. Perhaps this is one of the deepest lessons of Psalm 91. The presence of God does not always remove people from ordinary life. It reveals that ordinary life has never been outside His presence. The person closes the Bible. The cover is now familiar beneath their hand. They remember the first night, when fear made every shadow threatening. Tonight, the shadows remain, but they no longer appear empty. The person turns off the lamp and lies down. A question rises, but it does not take control. What will happen tomorrow? The person does not have a complete answer. They do not need one. Tomorrow may bring good news, another delay, an ordinary day, or a new challenge. The person cannot see beyond the night, but the shadow of the Almighty already reaches there. The breathing becomes slower. The body begins to rest. The heart repeats one final truth: I am not protected because I understand everything. I am protected because I belong to God. I am not safe because the world contains no danger. I am safe because no danger can remove me from His presence. I am not resting because every problem has ended. I am resting because God remains awake. Psalm 91 began with a shelter, but it ends with a relationship. The deepest promise is not a world without trouble. It is a God who enters trouble with His people. It is not a life untouched by sorrow. It is a life sorrow cannot ultimately steal from Him. It is not the guarantee that every storm will immediately become calm. It is the assurance that beneath the shadow of the Almighty, no storm will be faced alone. Perhaps tonight you are still waiting for your answer. Perhaps the room around you feels uncertain. Perhaps the future is filled with questions you cannot resolve. You do not need to pretend that those questions are small. You do not need to feel brave before coming near. You do not need a perfect prayer. You may simply say, God, I am here. And the God of Psalm 91 is already nearer than fear has allowed you to believe. He sees the road you cannot see. He knows the weight you have not explained. He hears the prayer you could not finish. He understands the trembling you tried to hide. His shelter has not closed. His wings have not withdrawn. His faithfulness has not weakened. His presence has not left the room. So breathe slowly. Release tomorrow. Receive the grace of this moment. And remember, you may not know what waits beyond this night, but beneath the shadow of the Almighty, you will never face it alone.